This episode of the Major Issues Podcast is brought to you by ComicBook Clique at tpublic.com. Take a selfie rocking one of our shirts from TeePublic and use the hashtag CBCWorthy for a chance to win 2 free tickets to see Captain Marvel in theaters March 8th. Just click the Shop Comic Book Clique link in our show notes to make a purchase, or follow us on Facebook for more information. Remember, you are worthy. Hello everybody out there in comic book land. My name is George Serrano, aka The Don, and if you're listening to this, you can only be here for one reason, and it's a brand new episode of the Major Issues Podcast, brought to you by Comic Book Clique. And as you know, I am never alone. Sir, please introduce yourself.
I am Took Barrett's legitimate cameo, Gregory Thomas, aka GT Rebirth.
GT Rebirth is here in studio, and we're here to chop it up about our main man, the man with the master plan, Pete Castiglione. I think that's his name. I think that's a joke. But you might know him better as Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, but not any version of the Punisher, Marvel's The Punisher, which made his debut in DareDevil Season 2, and which just wrapped up its Season 2 itself. Punisher. I think that might be the last outing we might see of the character.
It looks like it. Everybody's going on the chopping block here.
But yeah, we've had Punishers in the past before, film versions, versions in animated series, obviously the comic books, and then now this one played by Jon Bernthal. We thought it'd be a good idea, seeing as we didn't cover Season 1, to just go into a deep dive in all the things that make Jon Bernthal's Punisher unique and special, and what they've done specifically to this version of the character that they haven't done to other versions. But I guess to start off right up the top, what's your history with the Punisher? Like, are you a Punisher fan? Did you read a lot of Punisher books?
I have only read Punisher Max.
Okay. That's kind of crazy. Like, that stuff in there is a...
I felt like if I was going to ever read the Punisher, it was just like, let me read it in possibly, I guess, its purest form, which would be, going all the way with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not like, not to sound almost against that sort of thing, but like not a quote-unquote PG-13 Punisher, which is like what you're always going to get to some degree in your mainline Marvel books.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to see how you would write this book in the dirtiest sense you would, because it is that down and gritty of a character. You know, we're talking about a dude who is just like, I murder bad people, and there are a lot of bad people.
Right. Yeah.
And bad people do really bad things that we can't, talk about out of context.
And one of the biggest things about the character is that that idea that bad people there needs to be a definitive solution, a definitive answer to the evils of the world, almost is in direct contrast of the hero motto that there's redemption for everybody, or that not everybody's too far gone. Frank believes that there is a line you can cross. Rapists, child murderers, sex traffickers, all those kind of people, the worst of the worst, he feels like there is no redemption for, and that they should be put into the ground. And there's a lot of people who have been hurt by those things or those kind of people, and they believe the Punisher. They're on that side. Like, screw that. If the cops haven't been able to catch some of the worst in society, what does it matter if somebody decides they want to clean up the streets for that?
I also have a vaguer memory of the Punisher showing up in Spider-Man the Animated Series,
with that weird blue jumpsuit, that weird like teal. You remember
Aren't you glad the Punisher doesn't wear tights anymore?
Why was he in teal? Why didn't they just put him in black? He was in like this weird like.
But honestly, it's kind of the same like black shading of black that they did for Venom.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, we need him to kind of gloss and shine a little bit to match this color palette we put him in, instead of it just being a black void.
Like the blue Black Panther?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's just what you do when you have a deep color black in an animation. You have to like contrast it against some sort of shading, or else it just looks like a void.
Yeah.
That you're staring into, like there is nothing here.
Yeah.
Which makes it more fun when they start to animate like the Cloak character, where you can just go black void.
Yeah. Yeah, just a black smoke there. But we've always seen, Frank Castle. He rocks the very, very
Iconic.
there you go, icon. I was gonna say iconic icon. Very, very iconic symbol. The skull symbol on the chest. People say that it's as iconic as the Superman S and the Batman bat. And it is. People know that skull. It because of the character's background in the military. The military uses that skull in all kinds of iconography. And it's the idea that when you see that skull, something's coming. Reckoning is coming.
Yeah.
People are.
It
going to be
is
punished.
highly transcended of the comics because there are people who know the symbol and know what it means to a degree, who have never read a book.
Yeah, but Frank Castle is not necessarily just altruistic. This is not just a soldier who's come back from war and decided that his neighborhood needs cleaning up. Frank Castle suffered a very devastating tragedy. His family was murdered in front of him. In all instances, it's in front of him, right?
I believe he's always there for it. Yes.
Yeah. They're murdered in front of him, and that's really the catalyst to why he becomes the anti-hero, the Punisher. Like I said, this character's always been around. They've always found ways to try to integrate him, like we were talking about the Spider-Man the animated series.
He's sort of like a hitman for hire or something.
Yeah. And the character has been around since 1974. I actually read the first issue of that he debuts in. It's an Amazing Spider-Man number 129, and it's the Jackal hires Frank Castle to kill Spider-Man, and then Frank Castle's like, "Oh wait, Spider-Man's a good guy. Screw you, Jackal," and then he just like leaves.
Right.
And that's it. Like that's literally. I think you get told like that he's a war vet and that he's like super cool with like killing and super proficient with weapons. But I don't think you get like the whole like my family was killed and all the other kind of stuff.
No, you just get a man who's good at what he does and was hired under like a false pretense and then was like, screw you, this is stupid.
The next longest form we probably get of the Punisher is that Thomas Jane film.
Yes.
Which is I think in 2004, and I didn't mind that movie.
I saw a little bit of it. It's John Travolta at his hammiest.
Yeah. Yeah. But they play with the ideas of revenge and justice and vigilantism, and that's the first Punisher I remember seeing that looked miserable because they go to great lengths to show him drinking and to show him constantly having flashbacks and to show that because of what happened to him in the past, he almost doesn't want a life. His life is now all wrapped up in that trauma and in his mission to, I guess, stop that trauma from ever reaching anybody else.
Yes.
And that part of the character is very much in Marvel's The Punisher, like that depiction of like, well, that life is gone. There is no new life. My new life will always be reminiscing about my own life and never really moving forward from that point. Were you excited when you found out that Punisher would be in season 2 of Daredevil? And did you have a background with the actor Jon Bernthal at all?
I was excited about it. I thought like this would be an interesting take on the character. I know that the character has a level of history in Daredevil in the book, so I knew this would be coming from some place that had some depth to it.
Yeah.
Like they weren't just gonna make something up for these two to clash into each other.
Yeah.
I thought that Jon Bernthal was a great choice just based on the very, very little bit I've seen of The Walking Dead.
Okay.
Because I felt like this was a criticism I saw lobbied early for Daredevil season 2, which was that the Jon Bernthal Frank Castle is a lot like the Jon Bernthal character in The Walking Dead. Shane, yes. To which I just thought was like, well, Shane's character was kind of a lot similar to that guy, at least in the depiction of just like aggression and straightforwardness.
Yeah.
I think really if you get more into the minutia, the characters are different. It's just that Jon Bernthal has a performance that comes through.
Yeah, there's definitely points in his portrayal of Shane in The Walking Dead that if this show didn't exist, you can hold up and be like, this guy should play Punisher. Look at this scene.
Yes.
And you can see the intensity, you can see the abruptness, you can see the anger and the
forward
and the focus. Yeah, the focus, the laser focus, the forwardness. There's a scene in particular. I don't know how far you've gotten where
I pretty much seen the entire season that had to do with the farm.
Oh, okay, yeah. So in that season of the farm, people listen. They're like on season 9, so I hope I'm not getting any spoiler stuff for this.
If you're spoiled by it at this point, you clearly weren't watching and don't care.
Right. There's a scene where they Shane finds out that they've been keeping walkers on the farm because they think that they can be rehabilitated, that they're still real humans in there,
yes,
and that eventually once this sickness goes, that they'll be able to be alive. But Shane's like, wait a minute, so you've been keeping deadly zombies right next to where we sleep? That's not cool. And then while they're trying to wrangle new zombies into the barn, he shows up and pulls out a gun, and he's like, oh, so this thing's alive? And then he shoots it in the head, in the chest, and he's like, why is it still coming?
Yeah.
Why is it still moving? Nah, tell me. And he starts shooting it, and that anger and
when
all
they
that.
casted him, that was the scene that played in my head. I was like, that guy's perfect.
Yep.
That's the dude.
Why is he still coming? Why is he still?
If he's alive, how's he still coming?
And,
bang.
Yeah. And they do another scene in there where him and the main character Rick get into a scuffle, and they sit down and they talk about their differences, and it's like, you can't protect them, Rick. You're weak. Your kid's weak and your wife is weak.
Yeah.
And I'm strong. And it's the idea of, you hit them and they get back up, and I hit them and they stay down. And I'm like, oh, this is gonna work right in. So I was excited. I really liked Daredevil season 1 and the idea that they would be adding another really big iconic Marvel character to it and giving it that real gritty and realistic spin.
Yes.
I thought it was really, really cool. So Jon Bernthal's Frank Castle shows up in Daredevil season 2, and they almost play him right off as a villain, right? Like he's the big bad Punisher.
Yeah.
And he's out gunning people mercilessly for revenge. Because
that's what Frank Castle do.
Yeah, but it's eventually realized that there's actually people trying to frame him for multiple murders in New York by targeting the gangs and all kinds of stuff. It turns out to be this whole big cover up. How did you feel about the revelation in Daredevil season 2 that Frank Castle was a man, almost blamed by the government for a series of crimes, and there was this big massive cover up that involved the army, heroin, CIA eventually as we get into Punisher season 1 and stuff. How do you feel about the world against the Punisher in Daredevil season 2?
It felt familiar. Like I'm familiar with the idea that the military or any giant system would have this this business that they were running, this underground like illegal business that they were trafficking, and that they would find somebody to be purposed as the scapegoat for it all.
Yeah.
And like it's really easy when you can manipulate or control the media and just put like, this is the guy's face, this is the bad guy.
Yeah.
Let's focus all on him.
Yeah.
And we can keep sweeping all this under the rug on the left.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, no, be afraid of this
man.
Focus on the monkey.
It's also it's a little bit disheartening, right? Like it's discouraging, the idea that you could give so much up to yourself, and they play this around in all the seasons, but that you can give so much up to an organization or up to a group, thinking that you're doing it for the greater good, and that ultimately, when it comes down to the crap rolling downhill, as the saying goes, they will cut ties. They
absolutely.
will. You can't just be a loose tie at the end of the day. There's a lot in season 2 about, can you murder righteously? Should villains be put down for good? Karen, who literally deals with her life almost being taken in season 1, and who does take a life in season 1 of Daredevil, really believes that you should just kill. People should just die. In season 3 of Daredevil, she goes to try to kill Wilson Fisk herself, or at least die by his hands. And
she goes to raise Fisk's ire so that they have something concrete, like, this man assaulted me, put him away.
Right. So she goes to great lengths when she believes in something, and I think that she is she plays us in a lot of ways, where on the basis of what Frank's gone through, it's easy to be like, oh yeah, that's easy peasy. It's even Stevens.
Yeah.
But when you start seeing the gratuitous nature of what's going on sometimes, or how bad this war is affecting Frank, whether mentally, but sometimes just blatantly physically, like knives in the knees, shotguns. all that kind of stuff.
The needles in the fingers, that one got me.
Season 2 of Daredevil, he really got beaten down. There was barely a time where he was not with scars or bleeding or black eyes.
Mind you, it was the second time I'd seen that specific torture brand that year.
Oh, yeah.
Because they had done it in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to Mockingbird not that long before, and I was just like, not again!
That is. He said, I think in that they say like the Irish invented revenge or something like that. Or the Irish didn't invent revenge, but we certainly perfected it or something like that. So Frank Castle is a whirlwind in Daredevil season 2. He's a one-man war on crime. He's been that's how they've said that's how they described him in comics and stuff. And while they try to have this veil that it's all just post-traumatic stress, he goes to great lengths to say that it isn't. That while he does have damage to his brain literally from being shot, that's not the root cause of it. That he understands and he has the through line.
Right.
He makes it a big point to clarify. Like, I know exactly what I'm doing and I'm choosing to do it. I don't feel compelled or pushed. I don't feel like my mind isn't working in its faculties. How do you feel about his vigorous defense that he did not have PTSD, or just his going to great lengths to clarify that wasn't what they could just blanket it off as?
I understood it because it is real easy to throw that label on, like, a bad thing happened, or you went through a rough thing. Like, you went through war, you were a soldier. Clearly, you came back with something.
Yeah.
You know, it's like saying, like, you went to this country that's dirty and third world, like, you came back with something.
Yeah.
You know, because you ate a food.
Right.
Clearly, you came back a little messed up. So, like, this is how we're going to explain away your decisions and your brutality and murderous actions.
Yeah, I also find that with that almost makes every veteran kind of seem like a powder keg.
Yeah.
You know, like they're all waiting on a hair trigger to lash out, and we see a characterization of somebody like that in Daredevil. I mean, in Punisher season 1. But at this point, with the righteousness of murder, we're really questioning that if in this world Frank was set up, and if in this world everyone who is seemingly in charge of figuring out who did this is in on it,
right, he
is almost justified in his one-man war. How did you feel about that, and how do you feel about the justification of murder for the greater good? Which is humongous. That's a really big question to ask, but I guess in the lens of this and this character in particular, because without that logic, this character doesn't exist.
I think it's an important question to ask because it is really, really easy to just get caught up in the violence and like the adrenaline rush of the show.
Yeah.
To just like, or even the adrenaline rush of the comics when you know, if you read enough Punisher books, to just like get lost in this violence party because like it's just television and violent television is sort of like it's just again an adrenaline rush that you kind of get from watching these things happen, but really it's not real. So the concept of people's lives don't really come into contact with you.
Yeah.
You know, it's no different from playing a video game. Like you're not really taking people's lives. It's not real. Yeah. It's all a fake, silly simulation. But when you really take back and look at the character, you have to think about, like, when you go out and you seem to brandish this logo on your stuff. Yeah. You know, there are people who take the skull, the Punisher skull, the iconic insignia, and like it's on their bumper stickers for their cars. Yeah. You know, it's on their hats. It's obviously very well marketed because there's, you know, tons of merchandise with various versions of it. It's on people's guns when you talk about the military, or it's on their uniforms.
Patches, all kinds of...
all sorts of things. And there are people who will do it blindly.
Okay.
Without understanding what that skull really means.
Okay,
You know what I mean? For some people, that skull is just an intimidation factor.
Definitely. And it's used in the comics and here for that reason as well.
Absolutely. For others, it's like, it is their sort of belief in that violent retribution.
Yeah. And that violent retribution achieved by strategic means.
Yes.
You don't know, you wouldn't see like a normal, street punk
Right.
brandishing this. This is mostly like military cop, someone who believes in kind of an order. This idea that all bad actions should be reciprocated with,
or someone on the lower level who just like sympathizes with the idea.
Yeah.
Like I maybe I'm not a cop or a military or whatever, but yeah, from down here I believe that like, yeah, if he's a crap person, take him out.
Yeah.
Like why? What is this phony sense of like order and a law that we can just like lock these people away in cages? Like just kill them.
So do you think that this show has gone out of its way to make a like stark line between good and evil so that it'll be easier for us to be okay with Frank killing? Or do you think that there are people that are that far gone, that are that removed? This wasn't like mustache twirling portrayals more so than it is like there are people at the top who have more skeletons in their closet than you could believe, and that if push came to shove and we weighed all their sins, they probably should be taken out.
It's difficult to agree, because while I would never say anyone in the world should be able to hand out any righteous murder for any terrible means, like, what are soldiers sometimes other than people who are, you have a mission to take out this terrorist? I'm not going to tell you it's wrong.
Yeah.
That terrorist is out to do a really bad thing, and
Right.
ending that one life could save thousands. I'm like, is that right? Is that not righteous murder?
Yeah.
So to inexplicably and blanketly like discredit it is not playing in all of the angles.
I agree. Yeah.
To say righteous murder is wrong across the board is ignoring the fact that there are good cops out there with guns only for the manner of defense.
Yes.
To put down people who intend to hurt us.
Yeah, or hurt others.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, I think there is, on some level, a version of it. It just has to, it has to really fit in the right box.
Right. No, yeah, you're right. And I think that Frank had to be a soldier because
Yes.
those decisions have to be made on a daily basis in that life.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he comes back and when everything happens to him and his family is killed, it's easy for him to make those choices in his head again because they're doing bad things, and when I used to get paid to kill people who did bad things.
Right.
So why don't I'll just do this pro bono. I'll just do this pro bono. It's easy for him to make that decision. And in the same sense, when other people who've never had to make the decision before question his motives, you can see the frustration in his eyes. You can see like this isn't an easy choice to make, and I've already made it 10 times today. So when I make it the 11th time tomorrow, realize that I'm past what's bothering you about death and what's bothering you about revenge. I've done this. I've already buried my grave. I know that the things I've done may not be 100% right, but I'm willing to do them to reach a better tomorrow or whatever.
And on some level, even though you don't know it, you were okay with me doing this yesterday because it was someone else from up high giving me orders to do it.
Yeah. and both give you an illusion of safety.
Yes.
Or maybe straight up safety.
Right.
But the biggest thing is you didn't have to get your hands dirty to get it.
And it wasn't, you weren't seeing it. It wasn't in front of you. It wasn't on your street.
Yeah.
You know?
So, and that's played with a lot more in Punisher season 1 because between the ends of
not to cut you off, I do believe there is this like this belief that people put in these heads that like these wars or these battles are fought in like these Dragon Ball Z-esque barren areas.
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah. I mean, we've only seen people can only see what's been portrayed before.
Yeah,
and so by the end of Daredevil season 2, we kind of, for the most part, everyone's on Frank's side, even though he's killing a whole bunch of people, and he does get revenge on Colonel Ray Schoonover.
He is at worst tolerated.
Yeah, he gets his revenge on his dirty colonel who had used him previously to smuggle heroin across country, and had used a bunch of other men, as we find out, in this like really dark covert ops stuff. What the first hint we get of that is this disc with the word micro on it. Did you know off the rip what this was pertaining to?
No, because I had no idea who Microchip was. I didn't end up reading the books until I think a little before season 1.
What's Microchip's character like in the comics?
In the Max stuff I saw, honestly, like he doesn't last very long, so I couldn't tell you. I only remember seeing him as someone who was recently, like, the Max stuff I read portrayed him as someone who was previously related to Frank and then betrayed him.
Okay.
And so Frank took him out in like the first or second volume that I read.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
Poor
So I don't get much of a reference other than like he looks much different in the books. Like he's sort of a chubbier, balding man.
Yeah. I heard that he was quite chubby.
Yes.
But yeah, season 2 ends with him getting this micro disc. We don't really get to see what he does with it quite yet. But he's killed the Colonel. He now has finally put on the bulletproof vest with the Punisher logo on it, and he's out to clean up any loose ties that have to deal with the gangs that were involved in the shooting, where his family was killed.
Yes.
And so season 1 of the Punisher opens up pure Punisher, right? Like he's just going around killing people in bathrooms and shooting people from across the border and all kinds of really, really cool things. But how'd you feel about that season opening up? 20 minutes in, he's burning the Punisher outfit, and he's working.
I was a little sad about that.
And he's working in the construction site. He's Pete Castiglione. Castiglione. Yeah.
I was a little sad about that, even just because like it seems like you are made to earn these moments where like the Marvel shows will give you the comic book uniform.
Yeah.
And then they just go away.
Yeah.
Like Daredevil season 2, you get a lot of the uniform, and then he burns it. I'm just like,
and then Daredevil season 3, you barely get any of the uniform.
Now we got Maddie back in the sweats.
Yeah,
and that weird headband, and like then they put the uniform on the other guy. Like, fine. So like, I was a little sad because like I was waiting for that, and now it's gone again, and you're gonna make me wait again.
And I think we were all pretty, hip to the fact that like, okay, he's going to try to hang it up, but obviously something bad's got to happen, something so bad that he has to end up coming back and getting into the thick of it. But he doesn't really choose to get into the really, really thick of it until it's also said that everyone thinks he's dead. That's the biggest thing about the beginning of season 1. Everyone thinks that Frank Castle is dead, and so he's living a life, basically underground, new name, really, really like low maintenance, low profile and low maintenance. Like he eats a can of beans and just hangs out in his like 1-room apartment or whatever. And plays the guitar.
There are not room for like pleasures in Frank Castle's life. There was just merely like sustenance.
So what do you think is this the end game in this with this life, with this Pete Castiglione construction life? Like there doesn't seem to, it just like I just wake up, go to work, and come home, right?
I always just took it as like this is kind of like my cover for what I have to do to get by,
Right. But that's all he's gonna be doing, right? Getting by, because he's not gonna punish anyone. He's done with that, and he
Seemingly.
can't get any like high profile job because he's dead.
Right.
So he literally just has to survive every day
and find some way to like channel his aggression.
Yes.
Because is in breaking massive rocks.
Which some people would say you are able to channel or even, extinguish your aggression with interpersonal relationships. Mm-hmm. But as shown in that first episode of season 1, he does not want to be friends with anyone. No. He doesn't want to talk to anyone. Doesn't want anyone to know him. Is this a cover situation, or is this a don't want anyone to get close?
I'd say it's a little bit of both.
Situation. Yeah.
I'd say he doesn't have many room for new relationships in his life. Yeah. And nor do I think he wants to spend time.
Unless you're going to be his exact wife, like that lady, or those kids. He doesn't have any room for anybody.
No, not at all.
We get a lot of flashbacks in season 1. How do you think the flashbacks were? Do you think they were effective? Like seeing a lot of like his wife, and I the only thing I thought was weird, I think at one point he's getting beat to death and he's he's like imagining that he's sleeping with his wife.
Toward the that thing toward the end.
I was like, wait, I don't think I understand this.
I felt like that was
this
supposed
deeper?
to be his going to the light moment. I don't know. But the flashbacks were interesting just because I kept wanting to get like the full story from it. Like we keep going back to the I'm in bed, there's my wife, and there's the masked dude just with the gun.
I was also like wondering at one point if the shoe was ever gonna drop because a lot of it seemed like rose-colored glasses.
Yeah,
you know.
I always kept thinking that wasn't how it went down, but that's how he keeps imagining it.
Right, and there's something to that because at various points in both of these seasons of season 1 and 2, I won't be getting into spoilers for both these seasons. Is this idea like at one point he says like I was more comfortable with my second family in the army than I was with my first, and at some points I felt like I'd rather be with those guys in the foxhole than being with my actual family.
Yeah.
We get another story where he says that like his son drew a Marine on the wall and he like accosted him for it, like he yelled at him and got all up in his face, like why the hell would you do that and yada yada. And the kid's like, well, Marines beat up bad guys, so I wanted him to protect the house while you were gone. So there's a bunch of like. He's told a bunch of stories where his lifestyle, his job, his career got in the way, or with either his parenting or even his ability to be emotionally available for his family. Right. And then they were taken from him, which makes it more tragic. It wasn't all hard stars or horseshoes, but he was moving towards that direction. Yeah. And it got all taken from him.
I think at the end of the day, that's like the most important thing, that like this thing was taken from him before he could like fix that. Yeah. And now that's all he has is this this seething rage in that place he was in. Right. When he was just, a soldier.
Yeah, and what's funny about that, or I guess not funny, I mean these guys they're real good at sneaking themes under other themes, but this idea that's the mentality of soldiers sometimes is this thing where okay, well, I've trained for 2, 3, 5, 10 years to do this job in this service. But to be honest, to be a good soldier, you kind of lack being good at everything else. Like, because you have to, that has to be your life. You have to be willing to, really dive yourself into that stuff. And sometimes you neglect other personal relationships in your life. And so when it comes time to ending your tenure with the Army, the idea is to then integrate back into society, right, and be part of the big wheel that is, the world turning. So when you come back, and if you don't feel like you fit in that wheel, the only other possible avenue is to go back where you did fit. Go back where your skills were valued. Go back where those years of you having that experience, there's a group of people out there that will legit value that.
Yeah. And it's so easy to go back because, like, it's not exactly a job you'll get turned down for.
Exactly. And so in this sense, he only really quit. Re-enlist. He only really quit for his family. Mm-hmm. So if his family's not around, why quit? Why? Right. You might as well go back to what I was doing. Now, I can't go back to the military. I'm dead. But I can go back to snuffing out bad guys, getting intelligence and snuffing out bad guys and stuff. And you don't get intelligence without my man David Micro Lieberman, or Lieberman as he's always called in this. In this. You want to say that actor's name? You want to try that?
Ibn Mos Bakrak.
Yeah, Ibn Mos Bakrak. I wouldn't have guessed that was his name, but that's the actor who plays David Micro Lieberman, and who tries to blackmail Frank initially into meeting with him because Micro's also caught up in all this stuff. He found out that the CIA, or I guess was it the CIA? I guess it eventually ends up being the CIA, but he finds out that this dirty thing happened in Kandahar where, guys like Schoonover and Agent Orange created a black ops team called Project Cerberus, or Operation Cerberus, and using these soldiers from like special forces and Navy SEALs and all this kind of stuff, they did secret missions that no one knew about, that were not on the list, or they didn't have to report to anybody, and they killed a lot of people.
And clearly those guys are not happy being involved in it.
Yeah, and after a while you can see that them getting a bit hip to it and being like, because when you're a soldier, and they tell you what to do, you're always under the assumption that these orders are on high, and this is the best.
Right.
This is the best answer to this situation.
These people who you are following and taking orders from are like, these are the people who are right. Like, they're guiding us in the right direction. We are here on the righteous path.
Yeah, you trust these people intrinsically. You trust them with your life and your livelihood. And they talk about that in the group when they're having like that group meeting or whatever. This idea that you're constantly putting your faith and trust in people in the military, and they have to uphold that trust because that's their job.
Yes.
And when you come back, you do that with regular people, and they don't really owe you anything. And so we see.
If I may make a long comparison, I appreciate that there's sort of like this works on two levels with two very interconnected characters, which is like Frank Castle and Steve Rogers.
Yeah.
Who Frank saw as a hero. I don't think the show ever plays that up. But like,
that'd be really cool though.
It would be. Yeah. Like, Frank saw Steve Rogers as a hero, and it was almost every reason he got into the military.
Yeah.
And him and Steve come to the same conclusion that, like, at the end of the day, there are a lot of times where you were being led by people with agendas who do not match yours.
Right.
So, like, you are going in, like, Steve's going into missions for Nick Fury that he doesn't believe in, and realize, like, this is for Nick Fury's personal gain.
Right.
Not the gain of the country.
Not the greater good.
Or the gain of defense.
Yeah.
And now Frank and all those guys are going into missions that are for the personal gains of these people running this extradition and black ops.
And the lines are getting more and more blurred. The details are being more and more scarce. At one point, Frank legitimately believes that they're being set up in a trap, and he's told, "You literally shoot what I point at, and that's what you're here for.
Right.
We don't need you to think." And that expedition gets a lot of people killed.
Yes, it does.
It gets Schoonover's arm cut off, and that's why we see him with only one arm in Daredevil. But I think it's one of the best moments in that season,
right,
where you see him just go full Frank Castle Punisher and like storm the house.
Yes.
And like he has a handgun, he has a machine gun, he has a knife. He's doing all kinds of stuff and just surviving. And that's where I think you get the majority of the Punisher war cry, which is basically just a guttural that you get a lot. But
something Bernthal is very good at.
I think it adds to the nature of the Punisher because there's a certain animal magnetism and a certain animal reptilian.
Love that song.
Yeah, right. There's a certain reptilian nature about him. You know, the reptilian part of your brain, the fight or flight, the adrenaline pumping, if anyone's ever truly felt the rush of an adrenaline in a fight or any kind of life-threatening situation, you realize that you do go red. You do, like, blackout. You do, you know what I'm saying? Your body just moves on instinct.
Yes.
And that you see him do that. And to see him do that there, it's weird also because you can tell that he's doing it out of necessity. He's not doing it because it's the rad thing to do.
Right.
He didn't wake up this morning and was like, "Oh, I would love to kill a bunch of people." And that's another big thing that they go to great lengths to show is that he doesn't wake up thinking about murder.
No.
He doesn't. While he does this stuff and he doesn't really blink at the gratuitous nature.
He
of
wakes
gun
up
violence.
wishing he could get a good night's sleep for once.
Exactly. And then he finds out that there's somebody out there that's making sleep harder for other people, and then he goes and tries to put that person out.
Yeah.
But although there's a lot of gun violence and weapons in this, I don't think that they glorify it at all.
No. I think the most important thing is that they don't ever glorify the mission as like something that's good or completely just.
Yes.
There is always a depiction that like what he's doing is kind of bent in a way, but he believes in it.
Yeah, and that part of what he's doing because it's built from trauma, it's a little selfish.
Yes.
Like where the motives are a little bit more selfish than he would probably want to admit. In Daredevil season 2, he was paired opposite of another vigilante.
Yes.
So they were both talking about working outside of the law to achieve these means of maintaining truth and justice. But in Punisher season 1, he's almost directly in opposition of actual law enforcement. We get introduced to a new character called Agent Dina Madani, played by Amber Rose Riva, and she is somebody whose partner was killed during a sting of that Operation Cerebus, and so she's also trying to find out the most she can about that operation, but people seem to be dropping left and right
Yeah.
and literally dying every time she gets
any lead
on that. How do you feel about Angel Madani? She is a big part of Punisher season 1 and Punisher season 2, a wholly original character that they wrote for this, and a female, a strong female character. The Marvel is a little bit short of those some of these, sometimes, but I
not Marvel TV.
No, not Marvel TV. I personally like the character, but I wanted to hear what you thought of her.
I enjoyed Dina Madani. It was one of those things that like I'm always shaky whenever they introduce this like how do you say sidewalk main character.
Yeah.
That we're obviously going to be following for a lot of the show.
Yes.
I had the same situation watching DareDevil season 3 where they introduced
Nadim?
Yeah. Agent Nadim, and I'm just like, okay, clearly Nadim is going to be a massive part of the show. We're going to be following him a lot, and like we have to create this person's backstory and then like either juxtapose or run it straight into our heroes for some particular reason. And like hope it comes off well,
Right.
And that's always real hit or miss sometimes.
And it also doesn't help that like we've seen enough of these shows to either A, get really really tired of the cop co-star, right? Because we've seen it literally every show that's on the CW right now has a cop co-star,
right?
That is like, you probably shouldn't be doing this, but I'm not going to stop you from doing it, but you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Right.
And so you can really get long in the tooth with that and really get tired of it. But I never really got tired of her. How important is Madani's ethnicity in this show? And I didn't think it was initially, but I think showing that she comes of privilege would have been clashing if she probably would have been a white. It would
have been clashing?
Yeah, I think it would have been. People would have written it off as cliche.
Oh, okay.
You understand? Like if she was a Silver Spoon child,
right?
In Fifth Ave of New York City, and then her mother got her into Homeland Security.
Well-to-do woman got herself a nice job at this high-end law enforcement and.
Right.
Yeah.
And then she has a relationship with
essentially what seems to be the character that the DA plays in season 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Who finds herself on the short end of a life stick.
Because she is Pakistani or Persian? I really don't want to get that wrong.
Not sure.
I'm looking it up now though. But yeah, keep talking about Madani and see what I can find out.
You know what? I did not think about it until it seemed like season 3 offers you an incredibly similar character in again I lost his name again. The agent from season 3 of Daredevil.
Nadim.
Yes. I didn't notice it until then, and I was just like, oh, it feels like we've got a lot of brown cops on these shows.
Oh yeah.
Which is just like, that's interesting to see in a sense that the white cop is always going to kind of, you're gonna make an opinion about it immediately.
Yeah.
You're gonna kind of form an opinion about the quote-unquote white cop character almost immediately.
Exactly.
Every single time. So now, when you've got these other ethnicities playing law enforcement characters, now it's just like, okay, what am I going to learn about this person?
Yeah.
And what kind of cop are you? And oftentimes, they're mostly pretty clean.
Yeah.
They're just guys.
What an odd little dichotomy, right? What an odd little flair that they've put onto this show.
Yeah, they're all just guys trying to get their job done. These vigilantes keep messing crap up.
We had Ben Urich.
Yes.
We had
who was also white in the comics.
Yeah, Mahoney shows up here. Misty Knight.
Mm-hmm.
We get these in-depth looks, but then with every Misty Knight you have a scarf, right?
Yes.
So with every Madani you have a Carson Wolf,
right?
And so they're doing something. I feel like it's deliberate, with picking and choosing of these different sexes and
I didn't think so at
ethnicities.
first because it never dawned on me that like there's all these dark-skinned cops that are just the good ones.
Yeah.
In some way or form, like Nassim gets dragged in by his kicking and screaming into something he never wanted to be in.
Yeah.
And even though they are always sort of juxtaposed against your main character, they are not ever the villain.
Yeah.
It's just that their positions in the goal don't align.
Right.
Because they all seem to be chasing after the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they both want to take down the Kingpin. They both want to take down these this Operation Cerberus guys, but they don't align because one person's trying to, you know, uphold the law, and one person's just like, I'm doing this my way.
Yeah, Micro agrees to help Frank find these guys because these are the same guys that are after Micro and his family, and they, they think that they killed Micro the same way they think that they killed Frank, and that both of these men are dead. And so, because of their their partnership, Frank's one caveat is that anybody and everybody that they find dealing with this Agent Cerberus, no trials, all death.
Right.
How do you feel about that? That declaration or that agreement? You know, like, oh well, I'll help you, but we're on this page. None of them. We're not locking any of them up. Like, I meet them, they die. That's it.
I understood it because I absolutely feel at that point that Frank does not trust the system.
Yeah.
And that even if the system wanted to do right, that these guys are too powerful to touch.
Yeah.
You know, some favors are going to get called in, or some leverage is going to get pulled, and they'll get off.
Yeah.
So like, he's just going to eliminate him.
And this is the same justice system that had him arrested, and then he broke out of prison, right?
Yeah.
So he's really like
on some false pretenses.
Exactly. But we also get a little bit on Agent Orange. I'm trying to find the actor, but he is they did a real good job for me not liking that guy.
Oh, he was a scumbag.
He legit went out of his way to be like braggadocious, to be a jerk. He constantly was treating soldiers like dogs or expendable people.
What got me about him, and like, it's the kind of thing that you would probably hate in anything, you know, in real life. Like, he was the kind of guy who was clearly made it a point that he was above you, and that, like, you were the grunts to do the dirty work that he would never ever sully himself with.
Right.
You know, but we'll come in after you've done the dirty work, and, you know, tie this guy to a chair to torture him for whatever means.
Were they trying to show / say that he was like enjoying some of that stuff?
The torture?
Did I read that wrong? Yeah, like this idea, like just like this big man on campus, kind of like, I can just show up, and if I want to kill somebody in the desert,
absolutely.
I can kill somebody in the
I
desert.
absolutely felt like he loved his position. Like, he enjoyed being the guy who could just like manipulate all these like puppets in whatever way he can, and then just come in when it was all taken care of and just like beat up whoever.
We find out that William Rawlins knows that Punisher Frank is back and he's out, and so that means that Frank's probably coming for him, and so he goes and tries to enlist one of his best and brightest, but who just so happens to be one of the best friends of Frank Castle, a man that we find out is named Billy Russo.
Yes.
We get introduced to Billy Russo, the character played by Ben Barnes in Punisher Season 1. And the first thing we see about Billy is that he's pretty well-to-do. He's like clean cut, got a suit. He's running an organization called Anvil, which seems to be like a paramilitary organization.
Private military, yeah.
Yeah. That, handles, they take military contracts and they get stuff done. And he seems to be trying to use it as an altruistic way to branch and transition soldiers who are coming back from overseas. So everything seems to check out. He used to work with Frank, and now he's helping soldiers get better. And
which on paper seems like a great thing, because like, if you have dedicated 10 to 15 years yourself to the military, and your job was to be like a gunnery, like these jobs that do not translate back to, the real world.
Yeah.
It doesn't do you much good to be a 15-year trained killer, and then like, what do you do when you get back?
Yeah.
Do you just go to college?
Yeah, like, it is there.
Thanks for the GI Bill.
And what is a comparable experience from there? You've seen from other shows and movies, especially like if you've seen The Hurt Locker. The end of that movie ends with him feeling more comfortable at war than in the supermarket.
Right.
And that's life for some certain people. But
you can't just be a cop, because now you've got to like they're going to ask you to do almost the same thing you were doing, but at like 1/6 of the aggression.
exactly, and you have almost less. Like they'll cut you off sooner. They'll cut you loose
Much sooner.
sooner. You know what I'm
Much
saying? Like
sooner.
if you're a loose end, or if you're somebody that could drag down the organization, they'll just
Much sooner.
cut you sooner. Where I feel like the Army's more about like we are a brand and we're trying to,
Yeah.
like they'll be a little bit more forgiving and stuff. So Billy's around, but Billy has no idea that Frank is around. The only person that knows that Frank is around is Curtis Hoyle, another veteran who seems to be trying to do his best to help veterans because he's created a support group.
Mm-hmm.
He's an insurance salesman.
I don't remember what he did.
Yeah, he's an insurance salesman, an amputee.
Yes.
Because he says like this thing really helps the job. He's
right.
like, selling insurance. But not he's not a Marine. He's a Navy corpsman, a medic, and that's how Frank met him.
Which may as well be the same thing for some of them.
Yeah. So Billy and Frank fought together. Curtis and Frank, I think, met each other, and so Curtis knows full well that Frank's alive, but Billy has no clue. How'd you feel about Billy Russo's initial curiosity / pain that he felt that Frank might be alive and he may not know?
I thought it was interesting. Like, I kept finding myself trying to really read what the relationship here was, because it was confusing for a bit, I guess, is the word to use. It's like, I think that might be my lack of familiarity with the comics. I don't remember what, I don't know much about the Jigsaw character, so, like, I assumed anyway that there wasn't ever a relationship between the two.
And I don't think that there is.
Yeah.
I think that this was something that was made whole cloth for the show.
So,
I know that name sounds comic booky, right? Billy Russo. That sounds like,
it does.
That sounds like Tony Zuko, or all that stuff there.
It's a perfectly broadcastable name.
Right. It definitely sounds like it could be, mafia or any of that kind of stuff there. So,
it was interesting to see that like there was someone, other than Curtis, that like, the Punisher considered familiar.
Yes. Yeah. But not familiar enough to let know that he's back.
Right.
So that also like raises an eyebrow. Like, okay, so who are you letting in? Who are you letting out, and for what reason? Because, Billy was right there in the thick of it with Frank, and he was literally there when Frank quit Project Cerberus by punching out Agent Orange, and like
one of the first ones to shout about it.
Yeah. And he's like, we cannot keep doing this. We can't keep running into ambushes and killing innocent men and doing all these unholy things in the name of just obedience and military and security
for a mission we don't believe in and don't understand even.
Are we to believe that Frank left then and Billy stood?
I'm never actually sure of that.
Right, because Billy maintains contact with William Rollins, aka Agent Orange.
Yes.
They stay buddy, and I want to believe that Agent Orange allows Billy to move up to the ranks where he can get government contracts and create something like Anvil.
Yeah.
All so that Billy never questions what they've done,
right.
where they're going, or any of that kind of stuff, which I think is important there. But one of the biggest reveals we end up getting is this idea that because Billy and Agent Orange were in cahoots, that it was Agent Orange who sent the death squad to go take out Frank and his family, and that Billy was in on it.
Mm-hmm.
All to cover up the last loose end of this Cerberus thing, or the last person who seemed actively against everything that they were doing,
right.
or might be actually trying to get the stuff out. Did they also say that hit had to do with the micro CD?
I think on some level it was all vaguely connected. I don't remember.
Yeah, because Micro has actual footage of Frank killing a cop.
Yes.
A Afghani cop?
I thought it was just the informant.
Yeah, I think it was an informant. He killed somebody that they were saying was a terrorist, but it obviously wasn't. They were trying to, clean up their tracks. And that disc was given to Frank, and Frank knows that people know of it. And so this disc in many ways, is the proof that the government was up to something shady.
Mm-hmm.
That guys like Rollins was up to something shady, and it starts to get kind of crazy because all of Rollins' connections that are higher than him are willing to cut him loose.
Absolutely.
Because they're like, no, listen, I asked you early on. I gave you this cushy job, and I asked you early on whether or not you had anything scandalous that was gonna come back, and you were like, nah. And then 2 days later, you're like, oh yeah, it's Frank Castle, and we have to kill him.
Right.
And so we're shown early on that the government, that certain members of the government don't have a problem with things getting brushed under the rug, as so long as the brand doesn't get damaged. So long as but if you seem to be the one damaging it the most, they'll cut you off.
Absolutely.
And feed you to the wolves. Cut off that rotten appendage so the rest of the body could.
Because if we can create a scapegoat and make sure it wasn't us, then it's real easy to blame it on one person.
Yeah.
And if one person is the bad person, then it wasn't us, it was that guy.
Yeah.
Screw that guy.
Yeah. You take away personal responsibility. Can't talk about personal responsibility without talking about my man Lewis Wilson, a troubled veteran who walks into Curtis's group, and it just seems to be going through it, man. This kid can't sleep. He could barely talk without stuttering.
I had a pretty a tough visceral reaction to seeing him tussle and toss in bed uncomfortably, only for him to actually go out into his yard and just dig a ditch and then sleep into that.
Right.
And I was just like, wow, that's pretty deep. It seemed like a literal metaphor for him, he's trapped in a hole he can't get out of.
I was definite. Oh, right, yeah. And I like. Do you remember that little metaphor?
Yeah.
That they used.
What was that specifically?
It was the idea that a soldier digs himself into a hole. And he just keeps digging himself deeper and deeper, and then another soldier walks in and jumps in with him.
Yeah.
And the first soldier's like, "What are you doing now? We're both trapped." And the second soldier says, "No, I've gotten out of this before."
Right.
And it's this idea that a soldier can help you get out.
Right.
Everyone else will keep telling you to dig deeper, but a soldier is the only one who knows where you're coming from, and they can help you kind of get out of there.
Right.
But he is pushed by O'Connell. The biggest dick probably of this show, a man who attends these meetings and is not a veteran, blatantly lying
right
about his veteran status and pushing people to purchase guns.
Yes.
What do you think about that character of O'Connell, who's currently that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to take away our guns. They're trying to take away our freedoms. Did you see that as a caricature? Do you think it was a commentary? Do you think these people actually exist?
Oh, I absolutely think they exist. They're just people who are who by any means will take up any character they need to in order to push an agenda.
Yeah.
I think it's no different than people who can honestly just go online anonymously and present these things and present these characters.
Yeah.
That people can either relate to or sympathize with, and then push their agenda on them through that.
Yeah, it reminds me of
nor people who apparently brandish these fake military uniforms and ranks and whatnot, which is just the silliest thing.
Or just fake military. Military is often used as a scapegoat, or not a scapegoat, but a talking point when people are trying to push their agendas.
Yes.
In the sense that I remember when Colin Kaepernick first started taking a kneel, the idea was well, what about all the soldiers? You know how many soldiers you're disrespecting? And then soldiers started to come out and be like, nah, we're cool with that.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, were you speaking on the soldiers without ever being a soldier? You're going to jump to an conclusion about what they would be offended by. And
how they feel.
Right. And the same thing, he's sitting in these meetings how dare they take us, for granted and do this? And everyone's looking at him like, what are you talking about? I like when Curtis
first started... We should buy more guns.
I like when Curtis first started to be like, what? Why did you sign up? What did you, And you can start seeing the
cracks.
Yeah, the cracks and things start to unravel. But Lewis kind of starts to believe him. There's handing out pamphlets about the Second Amendment rights and stuff.
Yep.
And my heartbreaking moment with Lewis is when he almost shot his pops.
Yeah.
And his pops almost came down, pulled out that gun, did shoot. He actually did shoot. He didn't kill us. He didn't kill his father.
Mm-hmm.
And then his father, instead of running away or scolding him, runs right at him and hugs him. and tries to like console him
Right.
because he realizes that his son is kind of going through
a little broken, maybe.
Yeah, is going through it. Is Lewis, or was Lewis too far gone? What was Lewis's biggest issue that stopped him from I guess having an opportunity of redemption? I guess rehabilitating or redemption or just being able to live a happy life?
I think that's one of those things where it's just like the show directly juxtaposes him against Frank Castle on the topic of PTSD because they try to blanketly label Frank as suffering from PTSD to as a way out of the court issue.
Yeah.
And now they show you what it's like for someone who is truly suffering from that trauma of coming back from the war.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, where you can obviously state, like, yeah, sure, this guy could, like, try to make better decisions or try to see things from a different angle. I don't know how much of that mental scarring you can truly heal.
Okay.
It's real difficult because, like, now we're talking about literal, like, synapses going off differently in your brain,
chemical imbalances,
and
stuff like that,
and the ability to not impulsively respond to any particular trigger, any particular how do you say arousal of any point.
Yeah.
So, like, whereas me and you or anyone else could probably, like, you could see something that bothers you, but before responding, stop, think about it, assess, and then maybe respond if you respond at all. But then there's just like, you see something, it comes out.
Yeah.
If you don't have those filters, and I think if that mental scarring is too deep, I don't know what you can do. Like, it's one of my big sympathies. Like, how do you come back from that?
How do you feel about what happened with him and Anvil? Do you think he was a fit for Anvil? Do you think if Billy wasn't an absolute maniac lunatic, that an operation like Anvil would be the best place for somebody like Lewis? Or do you think that it was
I thought they were right to turn him away.
Okay.
Because I think you have to be concerned about that, especially, like, even if you just look at it from a business standpoint, like, this is a liability.
Yeah.
This guy and his unhinged, unpredictable nature can get either innocent people killed or my guys killed if something triggers him and he starts making bad decisions.
Yeah.
So, nor on some level, even though this is clearly what this guy wants, on some level, like, isn't it kind of unethical to just throw him back in the war?
Yeah.
As much as it scarred him?
But the opposite side of that is, how ethical is it to throw him just into the ocean of the world?
Yeah, I know. It's a real tough call.
Yeah, you're almost damned if you do, damned if you don't. And that's why I wonder, like, it's definitely not Anvil's responsibility, right?
No, not at all.
And I mean, maybe it's the world's more than Anvil's to be able to reintegrate these people into society.
They can certainly do a better job of it instead of just like, here's a bag and a kiss on the ass, and
I know that definitely I felt some of the things that were expressed in this first season of The Punisher. They did a lot to do with PTSD and veterans and coming back home from war. I think the initial thing with the military that a lot of veterans have an issue with when they come back is this idea that you spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with people working nonstop, and you sleep with these people, and you eat with these people, and you train with these people.
It's like you never come out of soldier space.
Yeah. And so you have this group of people who end up becoming family, end up becoming a camaraderie, and you never have to question their motives, their what they're trying to get out of this or any of that stuff, because we're all working for the same goal.
Right.
And then you come back home and everyone seems to have their own motives and own goals, and they're not all working to the same. You're not all working for the same thing. Yeah. And that individual nature of living creates isolation.
Yeah.
It's like, well, if I'm the only one who cares about me, then I guess I might as well just be alone.
You can come back to a suit and tie job, but now, like, you're working for a guy that just sees you as a number to pad his bills.
Right. And even though that those numbers exist in the army as well,
yes,
you're a number just like the guy to the right and left of you are numbers. Frank talks about how comfortable he was because of guys like Billy.
The difference being is that, like, most times you signed up to the military for altruistic reasons, and those are the things fueling you.
Yeah.
You know, you don't get a job at an advertising firm for altruistic
right,
reasons.
Like I went
you
to
gotta
change
pay
the
bills.
face. I want to face the change of advertising. No, I get it. No, definitely. And that brothers in arms thing is a big thing in this first season where Billy is a brother in arms. You know, Curtis is a brother in arms, and they trust each other to a level that, you know, even as far removed from the military as they are, that trust goes deep, and and those lines of loyalty go deep. And so when you find out that Billy was in on all the stuff with Agent Orange and killing Frank really reels from that. The realization from that really changes what that character's mentality is, and kind of reinstates the fact to him that, like, you shouldn't get close to anybody. Right. You shouldn't invest in
especially
human beings.
when the roots of Billy's sort of how you say, I guess you could say, betrayal, like, runs even deeper.
Yeah.
Because then it's not just the operation, but also it's like, oh, Billy knew about what happened to your family.
Yeah. Yeah. He almost kind of let it happen.
Yeah.
And you see those moments of, like, Billy with Frank's family, and it hammers it home how close he was to their family, and what this betrayal means. But you have this betrayal and Billy killing people juxtaposed with Billy and Agent Madani, kind of in a budding. What do you call that relationship?
I'd say it was because I didn't she mention that it was a year?
At one point in season 2, when she's being interrogated, they mentioned that it was a year. Did you know it was a year?
I did not.
Like it was a year.
I did not. But apparently they had been together for a year.
Yeah, Punisher season 1 seems to take place over a week, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was longer time than that.
That was a hell of a week.
Yeah, it was, right? Yeah, but you have Russo there, and he's kind of charismatic with Nadani, you know?
Yeah.
He's kind of cool, calm, cool, and collected, Billy. And Pretty Billy. And do you think it was her fault for falling for all that kind of stuff? Or do you think, where do you see Nadani's mind state when dealing with a guy like Billy Russo?
I think she was as swept up as anyone would be. Like Billy has a way with people.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
I definitely had that feeling in season 2. Without spoiling anything, is this idea that Billy knows how to make people feel important.
Yeah.
And that may come from the fact that he had kind of a shitty childhood. And so he knows how to get what he wants out of people.
Yes.
Because he never had anything, so he has to get them out of people, so he finds ways to maneuver and manipulate and stuff like that.
But I also felt like there was an idea that, like, Billy knows how to press the buttons of what people want from other people, because he knows what he did get.
Yeah.
So that issue that he has, that's repeated several times, that, like, Billy always feels alone and unloved.
Yeah.
He knows what buttons to press to make people feel loved and, like, appreciated.
Something that gets questioned kind of in season 2. Do you think that Billy Russo had actual feelings for Madani?
That I'm not sure about.
Not sure. Yeah, me either. I don't know.
I don't think he ever makes himself readable in that sense.
Right.
Because it was always so easy for him to just turn that corner when it was time to.
There's a scene, he actively kills Madani's partner.
Yes.
Sam Stein. And there's a scene where she's coming to him at the hotel to confront him because she thinks it might be him. And he plays it off as, like, legitimately hurt, even though he actually has killed this man.
Right.
So I can't tell if he's playing it as hurt in front of her, if he's playing that he's hurt that he got caught, or if he's just like, oh man, she's hip to all this.
Right.
So I can't really. You're right. I can't read whether he is upset that this relationship is now a casualty to the really dirty stuff that he's now in, or if this relationship is only a result of the dirty stuff that he's in. You know, that he's using this relationship like every other relationship that he has to get what he wants out of it.
It's. I want to believe sometimes that, like, it is an act because, like, the shady stuff just seemed natural to him too.
Yeah.
Like the shady stuff with the Anvil missions or whatnot, that stuff all seems just as natural to him.
Yeah.
You know, all his dealings with Rollins and all his dealings with the issues with the things he does to Frank, like,
and the Assassin's Creed blade in his in his wrist.
Yes.
That's
like,
also a big...
Right.
Like a normal man does not just have what's that called? Retractable blade that shoots out of his wrist so he can stab people in the neck.
And even at the end where he's sort of like screaming at Frank like this is who we are. We're not good people.
Yeah.
You know, that
We've always been criminals, Alfred.
Yeah, right. I guess those are the moments where Billy's being honest.
Okay.
And maybe Frank's the only person he is honest to at that point to some degree. I'm not sure.
But is that an opinion that he's derived because of the things that he's done, or did he have those things and so it was easier to do? Like, did he think before Cerberus that he's just a bad guy, so whatever bad things he does is just a result of him being that?
Right.
Or is that something that you tell yourself after you've done the bad things? Is like, okay, now there is no redemption at this point. Because of everything I've done, I might as well keep doing bad.
Right.
I think that's an interesting question because eventually the memory is wiped.
Yeah.
You know? And so with no recollection, you're almost allowed to be better.
You are.
Whereas he almost says that we are the actions, we are bound by the actions that we've had in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Those things label us and allow people to judge us more than anything else. And so because he has been a shitty hand of this weird covert operation, he is destined to be bad forever. And because Frank has killed in the name of this operation as well, that he's just a bad guy. He's a bad man. And that there is no redemption for guys like them. They are literally guys that people point at things and they shoot.
Right.
Operatic. And I also think that kind of removes a little bit of personal responsibility, right?
It does.
If you say like, oh, I'm here to kill and that's just what I'm here to do, then you don't ever have to question if killing is right.
No.
Because that's what you're there to do.
As far as you're concerned, that was your mission.
Yeah.
It's what you were put here for. Why would you question it?
Yeah.
Like, there's a reason I'm good at this.
Punisher deals a lot with this idea that there's always corruption at the top, that somebody at the top is tipping the scales a little bit more than they should. And I think between season 1 and season 2, there's a real, matter of fact, the entire portrayal of this character, there's a real big idea of like mass cover-ups, right? Like just like nationwide cover-ups or nationwide fake news about, like suspects or whatever, like the sensationalism of big government and their overreach of and what they feel they can tell people, what they feel they should tell people, what face things like the CIA need to have in front of the public. But ultimately, do you think that puts a pessimistic look on all that, or do you think that that's 2020?
I think people always have a very pessimistic look on it, though.
On like corporation, like just like the corruption and that not everybody in all good power can be all good.
Not that kind, I guess.
Yeah.
I think there's always the idea that like nobody gets to the top of corporation without stepping on someone to get there.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Like it's stairs made of bones.
Yeah.
But
and you kind of get the mentality of the big lie with Harvey Dent in Dark Knight Rises. Like, this is something that was probably shady that happened, but if we can clean it up and make it seem like something that was noble, then maybe we can move the society in a noble way because of this cause.
We use the lie to cultivate something good out of it.
Yeah.
And thus, hopefully, we can absolve ourselves of the lie by saying, but look what we created. Right.
Exactly. We stopped the mass murderer Punisher. We did nothing to him. He just was a crazy PTSD soldier, and we put him down to stop him from killing other innocents. And that's a lot of what they try to push in season 1. Like, we don't know where this guy came from.
We created the giant squid monster, but we get along with Russia now.
Exactly. Hey, don't talk. Did you see the cover of the newspaper today? It's like nuclear. There's literally like a nuclear bomb on the cover of the newspaper. Oh,
Jesus Christ.
Because it's some kind of weird nuclear stuff that's going on with Russia right now, but who the hell knows?
They're going to sell more Watchmen books for it.
Ultimately, Frank is allowed to do what he has to do, and we get a pretty cool standoff between him and Russo at a carousel. I was like, man, you're really going to take him back to the carousel, bro? Like, that's a low blow, man.
That was dark.
He brings him to the carousel, and they have basically a shootout. Agent Donnie just shot in the head.
I thought she was done.
I thought she was done as well, and I also kind of laughed at myself because Frank didn't run to her right away. Like, she got shot to the head, and he's like, well, I got things I still got to do. Like, that sucks.
That sucks.
And I think when he does see her, he says something like, damn it, Madani. Like, why'd you have to go get yourself shot for? But, no, they fight it out. And Frank, man, that scene is hard to watch to me of him just.
I've not seen it since the first time.
He just, like, the sounds and the screams of Billy, he's smashing Billy's head into this glass and rubbing it against and literally punching his head in the back. Like,
scraping him across shard glass.
And then he's, like, punching him in the back of the head so his front of his face keeps crashing into the glass. And he's just, like, this bloody, mangled mess. And Billy begs for death, but Frank says death is too easy. Living every day is a lot harder. And that's something that they've said, I think, a couple of times in here because people accuse Frank of being suicidal. Do you think Frank is suicidal in season 1?
No. I just think he's not afraid of it.
Okay. Like, that's not if that's the biggest threat, you're almost guaranteeing him time with his family.
Yeah.
And so, like
what's the worst that could happen? I die, I go back to, I go see my family in the sky or whatever.
Yeah.
But other than that, like, I don't think death is something he's concerned about.
No.
Also, I think he's resigned to the idea that, like, on some level his time's gonna come. Obviously, this is the life he's living.
Yeah, dude, I think that's something also said in DareDevil, right? It's like you murder people, one day something is all gonna come back.
Yeah.
To you, and what are you gonna do when that happens? He's all like,
"Oh, they better not miss."
Yeah, let it happen. And I think they also say that someone says that when he's in the hospital, it's like he kills people, and they're like, well, I guess somebody got him back for it finally, or whatever. When he gets shot up, and I guess we can't talk about Punisher in season 1 without the massive amount of just gore and violence, and not only that, the massive amount of damage that Punisher is able to take in this season and other seasons, and kind of just get away with it. How do you feel? Did you feel it ever took you out of the show? The healing factor of Frank Castle.
To a degree, I didn't let it bother me too much because I had to resign myself to the fact that this is still the same universe with, like, the blind kung fu man.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of really, like, blatant examples of that in season 1. I'm having a hard time. The first thing I think of is season 2 when that truck falls off the cliff.
The scene where he's, like, dealing with the Irish mobsters and, like, they just wreck him.
They put a drill through his foot.
Yeah. All sorts of terrible things he do to him. He just
he pulls out a razor blade from his forearm and just gets to work. No, now you're making me remember Agent Orange.
Yes.
Agent Orange
with those, like,
beat
steeled gloves
hell out of this man. That was hard to watch. That was hard. Like, the constant punching. Is that what he had? Did
he have, like, steel in his gloves?
Yeah, he had some sort of like what do they call knuckle dusters?
Yeah.
He had some sort of like enhancement, and he was just beating the hell out of Frank. And Frank was just like, you hit like a bitch. And I was like, that was making me laugh. But, like, watching watch the cameras of this happen, I thought was like really man, it was hard to watch. But my man Frank got his just desserts because after the boneheaded mistake of deciding you want to, like, dog out Billy Russo, the only man helping you keep Frank Castle, under wraps in this. He just wants to talk to Billy Russo like he's crazy.
Yeah.
So Billy lets Frank go, and Frank kills Agent Orange, literally beats him to death, and then plunges his thumbs into his eye sockets. What do you think about that? Do you think that was something?
Disgusting.
I do think that they built Rollins up to that, though, where you're like,
oh no, like
get it,
like
get
he
some.
deserved it. It was definitely like a righteous moment, but at the same time, again, that's not another scene I want to go back and watch.
Yeah. And
the only thing I'd go back and watch about it, honestly, I remember watching it live and just going, Billy really feels an interesting way about this situation.
Yeah.
Because like we've built up Billy Russo now as, like, the evil guy, but, like, he's sitting there watching Frank get beat up, and he's got this blank face, but you can tell he's not too happy about this either.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe he just disagreed with Rollins being the one to beat him. I don't know.
I actually think it was the enjoyment.
Okay.
I don't think he ever enjoyed the idea that Frank would either have to be killed or punished or any of that kind of stuff. I think he was able to legitimize it in his head because if Frank got what he wanted, Billy would lose everything that Billy had.
Right.
And so to him, in his mind, it was like, well, if we got to do something to Frank so that I keep everything, like, why would Frank want to take those things from me? How do I, I'm justifying this as I don't want to lose anything. So if he has to be put out of the way, it is what it is.
Right.
And when he comes downstairs and Rollins is actively laughing,
yeah,
like legit enjoying it, and he almost wants Billy to enjoy it too.
right.
I think that's when Billy's like, nah, this has gone a little bit too far. Like, that guy's still my boy. I had justified it because I felt like my boy was trying to take something from me. But now you're kind of playing all of us. Like, you've dumped all of us in this kind of like, we're obedient dogs that just do whatever you say. And I wonder, like, can you use that moment to infer that Billy does still care about Frank? That Billy does, or was that a pride thing?
Either that he does still care about Frank a little bit, or that a part of him still despises Rollins.
Yeah. Or I mean, there's also the idea that Billy was the kind of person that was always disregarded, and discredited. He went from group home to group home. He didn't have a very financially stable life.
No.
And so to the rest of the world, he was probably looked at the way Rollins looked at him, or he was spoken to the way Rollins spoke to him. And I think that triggered, like, you know what? Nah.
Yeah.
I know I'm poor, and I know I'm not. I mean, I have as much money and influence as you, but I think he reverted back to like street level Billy of like, you can get it too. Like, you can get these hands too.
Totally.
But he still actively wanted Frank dead because he goes out of his way to still, hunt Frank down until they have that showdown at the
have a little murder off.
Yeah, they have a little murder off. Who can murder the most? Who can have the most murder? At the carousel. After Nadani gets shot, she comes back to life. They can't kill that woman, and so she comes back to life. And
Dina Madani is a survivor.
Two important things happen. One, she is the one who chooses to give Frank a clean slate, speak to her boss, and give Frank a clean identity as Pete Castiglione. And the second thing that happens that we find out happened in season 2 is that she gives a kind of false testimony about how things happen and plays more into what they wanted to play into, which is her negligence as an officer, is what led to all of this going wrong. And they pin everything on Billy Russo, even some of the stuff that Frank did.
Right.
They pin it all on Billy Russo, but that Billy was able to do this to the extent because Madani wasn't thinking clearly.
Right.
I think
it's one of those things that we got out of when they try to teach you how to cut a promo in pro wrestling, which is like you tell some of the truth so that they don't know when you started lying.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And a lot of it lines up. And we do have the big bad, right? He's in the hospital. Billy Russo's in the hospital.
Yep.
His hands are on everything, and now that Agent Orange is dead, a lot of that stuff points to them. We have definitive proof. So we can excuse Frank, lock up somebody for real, but
if we can definitively connect him to these crimes, we can just pin the rest on him because it's like, yeah, sure, I guess he did all those things too.
Yeah, and people don't really, as long as it sounds like it makes sense, people, as we've seen in the show, people don't really care.
Yeah.
When it sounded like it made sense that Frank was a PTSD out soldier just killing for killing's sake, people were willing to believe that lie.
Right.
Real quick, let's talk about the death of Lewis, because I wanted to ask you, what do you think Frank feels about other soldiers with PTSD?
I think there's a legitimate sympathy.
Yeah.
I imagine is like there's a deep, like, I guess, a hurt for him there.
Yeah.
Especially with the fact that there is no there's no official rehabilitation
yeah.
for them.
Yeah.
They can offer you go somewhere, but like there's nothing to do or nothing that, like, there's no way to pay for it for a lot of those guys.
Yeah, and
especially if you didn't really save your money coming out of it.
And it goes from building a foxhole to building actual bombs. Right?
Yes.
Actively trying to take innocent lives. And by the end of it, he almost coaxes him to commit suicide.
Right.
Is that this is what you deserve, or is that lay all this to rest? Like, this is...
I think that's almost like this is the best way out for you.
Yeah. Like, I didn't know if he was like trying to coax him like in a bully way,
right,
or if he's trying to coax him into like this is like you were saying, like this is the best. With everything that you've done,
it only gets worse from here.
if you really believe that this world's shit, just take yourself out of it. Because instead of hurting more people,
the only other result from this right now is you go to prison in your current mental state, and it gets a heck of a lot worse.
Yeah, definitely. Did you feel for Lewis when it got to that point, when it got to the bombing point? Or were you
I just felt bad that I felt like there's just a loss of impulse control there, and like as I said before, I feel bad because I feel like how do you fix that?
Yeah.
How do you fix someone who's come back from the things they've seen and is so scarred that like these terrible decisions are getting made because there's no way to fix what's screwed up in their head.
Yeah.
And that mental illness seems just so untreatable.
Yeah.
It is only sparingly manageable.
Right.
And that only depends on how far gone you are.
And that's an actual mentality that trauma is not curable, it's manageable.
Right.
That you never are without it, you live with it and find ways to live with it.
Like the only answer for a lot of these people, which is horrifying and debilitating, is to like load yourself up on medication.
Yeah.
Which is a skeleton lifestyle.
No, definitely. No, when I first got home, I had trouble sleeping, and they had me on some kind of sleeping medication that made me feel like a zombie. I stopped taking it because it was just like this weird. You were like watching your body move around.
That's a term I hear a lot. There were just people who are just like, it's this out of body, like you're there, but like you're just.
And it's like so you almost
droning through existence.
It almost makes you angrier. Yeah. That the answer, the public answer to your trauma is to make you docile. It's like, right. You know, it's to kind of like drug you up, and that is a problem. That's a problem, and I hope
you may as well just put the tranq dart in your arm yourself.
Yeah, that is a problem, and I think that's a problem that we have to ultimately fix. To finish up season 1, let's talk about what Frank's idea of family is, with him kind of adopting Micro's family for a little bit. The stuff that the interactions he has with them, and the interactions he has with Sarah.
Was that her name?
I think her name is Sarah, and I think his real wife's name is Maria.
Okay.
So, Micro tells him to watch over his family, and because he has cameras everywhere, and his family thinks that he's dead. And Frank does stop by, and he seems
Frank almost does too good of a job.
Yes. He's like helping the garage. He's helping the headlights. He's bringing flowers. He's getting kisses over bottles of rosé. And what did you think about that family? I found some people felt they were annoying. Some people felt they were essential. How do you think about that arc in this?
I was fine with the family. I understood it, and I thought it got this was the only opportunity you were going to see where it's just like, oh, this is good guy Frank Castle.
Yeah.
This is a snippet or an idea of who he was before all of this.
Yeah.
Like, he was a good dude who helped out around the house and, you know, was handy with house stuff. Like, you could depend on him to fix the freaking toilet. Yeah. You know,
he did slip into it pretty simply, like pretty easily. It's almost like he wanted it. It's almost like this was his natural role. The same way he slips into the Punisher stuff.
Right.
Like, this is him. That although he was going by a fake alias,
mm-hmm.
he is that man. How do you feel about him finding out the son had a knife?
That was interesting.
Yeah, you know, he gets it all in the son's face.
He handled it in an interesting way, which I wasn't completely against, but it was a bit aggressive.
Yeah, I do like when he ramps up that way, though. I do. I don't know. I think it kind of reminds me of my training, that there is certain stuff that is not jokeable, it's non-negotiable.
Right.
You know, wanting to harm other people, having active plans to harm other people, having weapons to harm other people, I don't think is negotiable. So when we want to talk about it in a joking matter, I think sometimes you need to see how serious it gets.
Yeah.
Now, that kid was like, 9? So I don't know if that works.
Maybe
there.
not.
And what about, like, he puts the knife to the kid's throat and the kid's like, do it. Just do it. I was like, oh my God.
Like, what the heck is wrong with you, dude?
Yeah, I'm like, what is going on? And he slaps his sister. And he's like, we're all a bunch of snitches. That's all we're ever going to be. And I'm like, this kid's going through it. But Micro, it's going through it because of Micro.
Right.
Did you feel that? Did you feel that Micro should just show back up? Or did you understand the dangers of doing so?
I don't think you could just show back up, because like I think all that's going to do is like it's just going to sort of double the trauma.
Yeah.
Because if you're like, there's no. I mean, obviously you can't gradually find yourself into that position, but at the same time, like if you just show up, then it's like, wait, where have you been?
Yeah.
This was all a lie?
Yeah.
What have you done to us?
Yeah. And we do get that, right? We do get that when he eventually goes into custody.
Yeah.
It's like, what, this is all a lie. Let's screw in the bathroom. There's a lot that goes down.
A lot of emotions.
There's a lot of emotions that goes down with him and Sarah. But ultimately, when everything is seemingly, the dust is settled and the smoke is cleared and Frank's name is cleared and Micro's name is cleared and everyone is able to live a happy life, Frank chooses to not join Micro for dinner, for Thanksgiving dinner?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that choice?
I thought I think Frank found that house a little weird for him now.
Yeah. I kind of kissed your wife, man. So they're weird. I kind of kissed your wife. Is that him refusing another family again? Is that him choosing not to get close to other people? I mean,
to a degree, especially since it's not his family anyway, and some of those things happen that were kind of weird. It's not his family to have,
right?
So he just stayed out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus, and also because I believe that Frank, in some way, believes all he can do is bring harm to that family because he is who he is.
Yeah.
And like he'll probably doesn't believe he's going to be free of these problems.
Okay.
That he's created for himself willingly.
Yeah, he kind of sort of has. And so that's how season 1 ends. Frank has a clean name, at least in society.
Yeah.
And
has a chance to get his life back.
Yeah. Russo is in the hospital, seemingly knocked out. Madani's in the hospital, but she's seemingly gonna make a recovery. Curtis is a little bit taken aback by some of the stuff that Frank does, or some of the stuff the other veterans have done, but he's alive and well.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the only people that we're gonna be carrying over to season 2. When season 2 opens up, Frank is basically retired, right? He's moved to Michigan.
I think so.
Or at least he's passing through.
Yes.
And he's just hanging out by a bar. He sees this woman named Beth. They flirt around. They sleep around. And Frank seems to be ready to get back to having a regular life. This show goes to lengths to show. Now, this is the second time, right? Because he tried that whole Pete Castiglione stuff with the construction. This is the second time that's kind of showing us or telling us that Frank isn't really allowed to be happy.
Right.
Do you think this answers that? Do you think that this season or the show itself is trying to tell us that either A, he's not allowed to be, or B, he is allowed to be as long as that happiness comes with him shooting a bunch of people?
I went right into that second season remembering that line where he says like he's for the first time in his life he's a little scared because he doesn't have a water fight.
Yeah.
So like I kept wondering how that was going to play into this season, and it seemed like the first episode wanted you to believe that maybe he had started to adjust.
Yeah.
So he's just hanging out with this bar. He's made friends with the bartender, and like, oh, okay, they started to sleep around, and like he is immediately honest with this woman about who he is, because it's just like, if it's gone this far, it could get further, and I may as well start now.
And if it doesn't go further, like, I literally have no other connections anyway, so I'll just go to another town.
I can easily just skip town, just get in my van and
my
find
big
another
old
place.
Scary black Punisher van.
Yeah.
And handle that. So I mean, would you say that season 2 is Frank trying not to be the Punisher?
To a degree, yes.
And still kind of either subconsciously or consciously being roped in to all that stuff, because in that first episode he kind of isn't the Punisher. He kind of just is Pete.
Right. And I assume that he hasn't done anything because now like the Punisher is almost a celebrity.
Yeah.
So like
don't forget he's dead again too.
Right.
He's dead again. He died. Everyone thinks he's dead again.
So like any sighting of the Punisher, like he can't do that stuff completely in the dark.
Yeah.
Because like there's only so many bodies and so many gunshots you can, let out without being seen or heard, right?
Yes.
So I believe that he hasn't done anything because nobody knows about it.
That makes sense. He doesn't want to make a big hoopla.
Like the moment anything goes down, like it's a headline.
Yes. and the motive
and knowing the way. Go ahead.
Or the scene would usually dictate only one person,
Right.
right? Like, you know.
Right. And knowing the way that journalism works, like if there was even something like slightly resembling it, it would be like Punisher
He's
returns.
got to be back. Yeah, he's got to be back. Or there's got to be copycats.
Right, or Punisher copycat.
Someone's doing Punisher stuff. Right, exactly.
So that he has stayed out of the headlines leads me to believe that he's not done anything since season 1.
I also think that this is in this season that he is referred to as a shit magnet. Do you think that that's a apropos?
To I guess to a degree, Frank? I don't know what the time jump is between 1 and 2.
Yeah.
It's not clear, is it?
Frank meets Amy Bendix, played by
Georgia Wingham.
Is that how you did it? Yeah. If you want to talk about this character, you can. I was not a fan of Amy. I felt that Amy was a walking plot contrivance.
Contrivance?
Yeah, I felt like, or plot convenience.
Okay.
I felt like whenever they wanted things to go a certain way,
mm-hmm.
Amy would make them go that way, because if Amy wasn't in that situation, it wouldn't have gone that way.
Sure.
There's a moment where I was watching the last episode, and I mean, it doesn't matter to spoil it here, but the main antagonist at this point is a man named John Pilgrim, played by Josh Stewart. And John Pilgrim's in his hotel. First of all, John Pilgrim does not have the girl, and the entire show he's trying to get the girl.
Yes.
John Pilgrim parks the car in a hotel parking lot and goes up to his hotel room to remove shotgun,
pellets.
What's that called? Bird shot from his leg or whatever.
Okay.
And you see that she's in his car and she opens the trunk. First thing I say out loud is, "Okay, now leave. Go."
Right.
But then she sees that there's a shotgun in the car, and so I'm like, "Okay, hide behind the car, wait for him to show up. You got him. Boom,
right.
He's dead. You ain't got nothing to worry about." But she goes all the way to his hotel
door.
To his hotel door, knocks on the door, and then hides behind the corner. So I'm already mad, right? But then she eventually calls Frank. So I'm like, oh, cool, because Frank didn't know where she was at.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, now Frank knows where she's at. Okay, Frank, you know what to do. You tell her to get as far away from this hotel as possible. You handle the stuff with Pilgrim, and everything is good. No, she wants to come along. And because she comes along, she then gets captured by Pilgrim.
Right.
When Pilgrim never had her.
Right.
Never had her. All the way up to episode 13, he has her. So Pilgrim...
It is basically on one leg now.
Pilgrim and Frank get into this really bloody, parking lot trailer fight, right? At the end of episode 13. And that entire thing happens because Curtis acts unilaterally,
mm-hmm.
and because Amy got captured.
Yes.
And so I'm like, why is everyone in Frank's way in season 2? I feel like in season 2, legitimately...
let's just call it out right here. How did you feel about season 2 as a whole?
I did not like season 2, to tell you the truth. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. The last 2 episodes won me over a lot more than a lot of it.
Did they?
Yes. The Punisher just being the Punisher stuff always works for me, and there was just a lot. Like, I felt that first episode was really slow with all the Beth stuff.
Right.
You know, they show Beth, her and Beth before sex, her and Beth during sex, her and Beth the morning after sex, him and Beth at the bar, him and Beth.
Don't forget him and Beth and the kid.
Oh yeah, him and Beth and the kid having breakfast again, pancakes.
Yes.
You know, like they really spent a lot of time on that, and maybe I did start to wonder and worry in my own head, what am I watching this show for? If I'm not being entertained by this, am I subconsciously coming here for a different reason? Am I subconsciously thinking I'm getting a different show? And is that my fault? Was I told?
Well, it's because we have work to do.
Oh, that's also true. That's also true.
But no, I understand what you mean.
I didn't feel like it had the same gravitas that this first season had.
Right.
And it's mostly because I think that the time was spent trying to tell 2 different, very loaded stories.
Okay.
The first story is this idea of vengeance coming back to get Frank.
Yes.
Billy Russo has awoken, and even though he can't remember what Frank did to him, he eventually finds out that Frank has something against him, and therefore that gives him something to have against Frank.
Yes.
And so this idea that your skeletons in your closet, the things that you do and the bad things that you say you do for the greater good might and probably will come back to haunt you. Right. And I think that's a very poignant and good story arc to have, but they don't give it all to that because they have this side story with Jon Pilgrim and this "you're not so different, you and I" stuff. My family's tied up into something where I am constantly fighting for my family's life and their survival. Mm-hmm. And that's why I go to the great lengths and the gratuity of violence that I do. I am put in this position because people put me in this position, and this is what I'm good at. And so I'm only here. Let me be what I'm meant to be, something that it's said in the series multiple times. And I feel like right when you feel like you're getting into the nitty-gritty of the Russo stuff, you're thrown into the Pilgrim stuff. And right when you feel like you're getting into the nitty-gritty of the Pilgrim stuff, you're thrown in the Russo stuff. And when both get to the heights of excitement, Amy shows up. and Amy has a "this is what Amy does when I'm bored" montage. Amy has a "this is what I do with a credit card" montage. Amy has a "let me train with a gun" montage. Let me have a getting like a silly outfit montage. And I wasn't there for any of that. And the loss of Micro, man. Golly, I didn't realize how much I liked that character when he was gone. Because I don't think that she had probably as much time in the series as he had in the first. And I don't think that it's a comparable switch.
Oh, it's not a comparable switch. I felt like the second season definitely had an issue with focus, because like it felt like you would get 3 issues dedicated to the Billy Russo problem, and then we'd go back to Jon Pilgrim.
Right, and the time spent without Pilgrim almost makes things feel disconnected in a way. Like, oh yeah, what were we doing here?
Right.
Like, oh yeah, what was this about?
And it's almost like each problem had its own set of characters.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, this is a Pilgrim villain episode, so we have to deal with Frank, Amy, Pilgrim, and all the auxiliary characters that surround those people, right? Like the Schultz family that's very much like manipulating Jon Pilgrim to do their bidding.
And then Madani doesn't even come into the Pilgrim stuff at all.
No,
she's purely
Madani
there for the
is
Russo
the Billy
stuff.
Russo story.
Yeah,
that's when you get Frank, Curtis, Billy, Chris DeMont.
Yeah,
played by what's it, Floriana Lima.
Yeah,
like
of Maggie Sawyer fame from
each
Supergirl.
Story has its own set of characters, and Frank is constantly weaving through them.
And I hated it because it made it feel like he had no agency. He was pushed by Madani to do this, and then he was pushed by Amy to do that, and then he's pushed by Curtis to do this, and then he's pushed by anyone at that point.
And then they both feel like they end separately.
Yeah.
Like they don't
and he doesn't end either one. I mean, he ends the Russo one kind of, but it was ending. You know, like he doesn't end either one. One of the guys still in the wind. So it's like, what are we doing?
I mean, he ends the Pilgrim problem by redirecting the problem elsewhere.
Yeah.
And then shoots that problem in the head.
Yes. We are introduced to Anderson, Eliza, and David Schultz. They are members of the Schultz family. Anderson and Eliza are very powerful, wealthy socialites that are also extremely religious.
Yes.
And they donate, and they have a lot of influence and power. And they are able to coerce a man, a former white supremacist named Jon Pilgrim, who was I want to say he was like a hitman. He was into some kind of dirty body disposal in New York City,
right?
Before joining into this religion, being mentored by Eliza and Anderson, and meeting his wife. Mm-hmm. He then his wife succumbs to, I want to say it was cancer. Probably just some illness.
They never really seem to state what she's dealing with.
If they don't state it, it's McGregor syndrome. So his wife succumbs to McGregor syndrome, that callous beast that is McGregor syndrome. And because Eliza and Anderson are wealthy and are paying for her like her medication and her procedures, mm-hmm. they enlist John to go and find salacious pictures of their son David, who is a closeted homosexual senator. Mm-hmm. So David is caught kissing men. Amy and her group of newsies grab a bunch of the pictures, right, and are gonna go sell them to the Russians. Mm-hmm. But Pilgrim gets there first, kills the Russians, kills all the kids but Amy, and the rest of the series is him trying to get the pictures from Amy, to deliver back to Anderson and Eliza.
Kind of makes him feel like a poor weapon.
Yeah.
Like, wait, did you not think to check under the bed?
Yes. Yeah, because she was under the bed the entire time. And he goes to Michigan and still doesn't get it done.
Yeah.
And then Madani shows up with the helicopter. Madani ex machina shows up.
Right.
But you never in this time does Pilgrim look like he's having a good time.
No.
He always looks pained and burdened.
He talks very softly and he talks in a very direct manner.
There's an accent there, right?
Yeah, there is, like some sort of Eastern European kind of thing.
I'm not good at putting my finger on those. But,
no, it just like some sort of European. It felt like.
Yeah, and with him you get this idea and this question of is who you were all you're capable of being. He was a former hitman, and he seems to keep trying to be away from that life and just raise his sons. And Frank allows him that freedom,
right?
But is all he is meant to be what he's done before? Is the culmination and the average of his past actions and mistakes? Is he the result of that? Is he trapped to being a result of that, or can he?
I think he believes he is, on the guise of like he's looking at it from like a power he can't control standpoint.
Okay, yeah.
Because of his religious aspect.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's thinking of it as like, I am just sort of a piece on this giant chessboard that God is playing, and like, if God believes I'm supposed to be this, then this is who I'm supposed to be. But really, like, at the same time, it doesn't speak to the idea of like, well, were you meant to be a racist? Because you got past that part.
No,
supposedly.
No, what you're saying is definitely true, because when he has a conversation with Amy in the car, Amy's like, well, are you kidding me? Frank Castle will kill you. And he's like, well, God is going to choose who's righteous.
Yeah.
Like, he almost seems reserved in this idea that he might die. But if he does,
that's what it was meant to be.
It was chosen, yeah, it's meant to be. Someone else who's dealing with this is who you were all you'll ever be, is my man Billy Russo.
Mm-hmm.
He wakes up from his
coma?
Yeah. He
Well, he seemed like he was awake at the end of the first season.
But they also had a bunch of like scenes of him having therapy.
Yeah.
And so that's where we meet the therapist, Krista Dumont, and she seems to be really trying to rehabilitate Billy before Billy holds her hostage and uses her to break out of the hospital.
Yes.
Then he goes and kills somebody who molested him as a child.
Yeah.
Because he can't seem to remember anything after his service.
Right.
He can remember his service, his childhood, all that stuff. But when it comes to after his service, i.e. the killing of Frank's family,
yes,
Anvil, and the shooting of Madani in the head, all the real major big things that he's done, the bad things that he's done, he cannot seem to remember. After killing that person that sexually assaulted him, he goes back to Krista's house because he doesn't know anywhere else to go, and she allows him in, thus tying their little devil's knot of coercion.
Coercion.
Yes. How do you feel about that turn? That Harley Quinn-esque turn of Miss Dumont falling in love with her fractured patient.
It felt foreshadowed. Like, I felt like I saw it coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. If maybe only because I felt like I knew Floriano Lima was going to play a bigger part in the show.
Did you know that?
In the stuff, seeing her talk about it, it seemed like they had definitely pegged her as like a long-term player.
Yeah.
And like, I really wasn't surprised that she let him in for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it definitely felt like there was a strong sympathy there that she had for him, and like the lengths that she went to sort of defend him to other people. Yes, especially Agent Madani.
Right. And those were all uncomfortable scenes when you realize how close Madani was to Russo.
Yes.
And her active hate. This is somebody who goes and visits this man at the hospital just to talk smack.
Yeah.
Drunk. Like she was.
I was like, oh, it's going to come back to bite you so hard.
I'm like, you are literally just drinking and just hammering it home, and he doesn't know why this lady's doing this because he can't remember.
Meanwhile, Madani is convinced that he is faking the entire thing.
Yeah. Was this show trying to actively make you sympathize for Russo? And is his fate worse than what Frank wanted to give him, which was this constant remembrance? He actually has the opposite, where he has fragmentation of memory, and the only thing he can remember from the one thing Frank wants him to remember is this nightmarish skull and blood and screaming from that traumatic event. Is that worse than what Frank wanted to give him? Is that better? And are we supposed to feel sorry for Billy in this?
I think to a degree they want you to feel Billy Russo's pain in order for you to understand the decisions he makes.
Yeah.
And like the position he's in. It was a really tough journey to follow, because like he keeps having these moments where he is sort of really depressed about the fact that like now he only is stricken with the memories of these people that he considered friends, and they all hate him.
Yeah.
Which is tying back into what is now an instinctual feeling of neglect that ties back to the rest of his problems from childhood.
Right.
At the same time, it's like, but you were a really bad person, and you still are.
Yeah.
And you are now you've gone back into your criminal activities.
What do you think about his stubborn nature? Once he finds out why people hate him, he doesn't necessarily like try to extend an olive branch. He just doubles down on like,
the anger.
Well, if they hate me, then I'm gonna hate them too.
I think that's just the quick to anger synapses that are probably going off in his scarred brain.
Yeah, because we see him at many points affected to the point that he literally can't think clearly.
Right.
And you can see the pain expressions on his face.
It's sort of like migraine headaches.
Yeah, I mean his head got smashed. I never at one point was like, no, this is not realistic, because I remember how often his head got smashed into that damn glass, and I was like, I can see some effects.
I can imagine the pulsing effects in that head.
But the trauma of Billy is easily understood by somebody like Krista, because we get a hellacious revelation that Krista's father was going through a divorce with her mother, and so he assumed that he stated that if he could not have Krista, that no one could, and he jumped out of a window with her, basically killing himself and fracturing her, because she ended up
failing to kill the daughter. Who
did not
survives.
kill the daughter. She survives. Haunted with the idea of falling out of a window, fear of heights and stuff, and scars all over her body from the invasive surgeries that they had to have to make sure that she was alive. That trauma, coupled with her outward idea of helping broken people, like if they were broken animals, or this idea that anybody, anything given an ounce of redemption, love, and care can reform, those are not bad ideas. Those are not... intrinsically,
it's all her like chasing after this uncatchable dragon that she could have fixed her father.
Yeah.
Or that someone could have.
Yeah.
You know? So if she can keep other people from suffering in the way that she did because of the fact that her father was somewhat emotionally fractured, she can have a piece of a redemption or of closure.
Yeah. I don't know if you could get it with Billy though. You know, there were many points in which Billy questioned her actual authenticity, whether she really cared about him or not. I think that she does. Yes. I think that she did. She ultimately says it in her hospital bed. And in the same sense, do you think Billy cared for her?
I think he did toward the end, but I also think I think the paranoia was like heightened constantly.
Yeah.
So at the first sign of trouble, he was ready to write someone off.
Even towards the end of the series, I thought Krista would eventually like get her bearings and be like, you know what, I don't want to deal with any of this. No. But she keeps to just dig herself. She just
doubles down on it in the hospital.
Dig herself deeper and deeper. And she and Madani kind of have like this, their paths cross in a very intricate way, because she allows herself to actively manipulate Madani. And lie to her and try to get things out of her over a bottle of wine. How did you feel about their relationship?
For a second there, I thought it was going to be actually like they were going to do something pretty interesting with it, until basically it just comes out that like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, I know how to hurt him now.
Yeah.
I figured out how Frank works, apparently.
Yeah. And you have you have that brilliant standoff where she comes in and Krista's bags are already packed by the door and stuff, and it's like, "You going anywhere?" "Oh yeah." I don't think Krista's a bad liar on cue, or at least not in this particular instance.
It was weird for me in that scene where it's like, the moment she goes up to Billy Russo and it's just like, "I know how to hurt Frank," I was like, okay, she's gone full-blown villain now.
It's over, yeah. Yeah. And so in this instance where Madani has her almost dead to rights with all these facts and figures, or at least this accusation.
You know what it reminded me of? It reminds me of the Vanessa scene where she has them killed.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Like Vanessa's gone full-blown villain.
Like, no, we must kill him. I get it. Like she's bought the bullet and she's here.
Except like on Krista, it happened a lot faster.
And it's because of Krista that Billy even thinks that there's any out of any of this. Krista is the one who builds up. Let's get new identities. Let's move somewhere. Let's get out of all this. Let's continue a happy life. And so, if not initially, Krista eventually ends up being the personification of that new life for Billy, of moving past the trauma, moving past the memories, moving past the all of that. And I think that
we scored a bunch of cash. We're gonna get out of here and just
let's go run away and be happy. Bonnie and Clyde it up. I'll go get these flowers.
Billy has this scene that's almost reminiscent of the Raindrops Pity Parker scene in Spider-Man.
Yeah.
He's just the happiest he could ever be.
He's happy. He's smiling to himself. He gets a bunch of flowers, and then he sees his girl get dropped off at her apartment, literally. And Madani goes one-on-one with Krista, who probably
the moment Madani and Billy make eye-to-eye contact from that apartment, I was just like, oh girl.
My blood was pumping, and that's how they ended that episode.
Yeah.
Knowing that it would pick up, on fire. And I always like when they do that with the last episode.
Like, oh, you about to get it.
But yeah, Madani and Krista go at it hand in hand, and Dumont gets a lot of action in. A lot of people were not too happy about that because Madani is a trained Homeland agent. But
and Krista literally draws first blood.
Yes.
But that was nasty.
But if you see, and Krista went out of the bathroom and around.
Yeah, that was it. She had something going on.
She had like some kind of secret.
I guess. I think Billy taught her some strategic trickery.
So two things. One, a lot of people had a problem, like I said, with Dumont getting as much offense in. But I have to remind you guys that in the previous sex scene, we saw that Dumont loves pain, and that she literally gets off on pain. She literally, it's not a factor for her. So when she's being wrestled down and at one point actively being choked, she was being choked the same way Billy was choking her probably 2 episodes prior, or probably that night.
Yeah.
So that's one. Second thing, I'm a little bit upset. Chekhov's tea kettle. All right? And you're already laughing because you know what I'm talking about, bro. They showed that tea kettle like 4 different times, and it made me seem like this tea kettle was going to play into this fight at some point.
It just turns it off.
And it never, she just turned it off.
I was waiting for something to go boom for some reason.
Now I eventually, after rewatching it, realized that the tea kettle is a metaphor for the situation. And
for it boiling over.
Yes, and because when it gets to the point where Krista has the knife in her face, that's when it actively starts to whistle because the
situation has boiled
over
to the top. Yeah,
it has boiled over. How you feel about Madani handling that situation by pushing her out of a window?
I was like, okay, we went straight for like the
full circle, like
the straightforward, like we're just gonna push her right back out of a window again.
That was so like it happened, and her look of pure horror when it happens, like really made me feel bad for the whole thing. It did. I honestly felt bad.
And then like they completely reshoot the way like the glass is done with her as a kid.
Yeah, and her seeing her father still laying there. I do think that she was pretty polite by waiting for Billy to show up to die. Because Billy shows up, she looks at him and then like coughs blood and dies. And I was like, oh, okay. Now she's dead. Right. I thought she was just dead.
I did too.
But then she's like looking at she can see her father and then she eventually dies. Madani takes a moment to herself to be like, I just kind of killed somebody and I just pushed somebody out of a window.
It's this weird moment of like half regret, half like, man, I have not had a W in a while.
Yeah. And all that told me was that her body language spoke to me and it said that I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be lied to. I don't want like the presumptions of this badge of my job is getting in the way of doing what I want to do. And I actually thought that in that moment she was thinking about resigning or coming clean with everything that happened.
Yeah.
But she doesn't, because before she can do that, like you say, she locks eyes with Russo. Russo shows up and they go at it. And Russo accuses her of taking something from him. Like, why'd you have to go after? Why'd you have to bring her into this?
Right.
This was between me and you. How do you feel about that statement?
I think that's Russo's paranoia.
Yeah.
To some degree, like this.
Like, I didn't hurt you that much. I didn't kill that many people
right.
for you to take this away from me. Like, you've now personally done this to me. You're not upholding justice. You're actively trying to spitefully take away my happiness.
Right.
You think any of that was that for Madani?
I thought it was a coincidental like connection.
Okay.
Like, I don't think it clearly didn't go near to like kill the woman.
Yeah.
Obviously she was doing something wrong and everybody knew that.
Yeah. So you did like openly mock her trauma in the
yeah. That Madani's openly mocking everyone's trauma.
Yeah, that's also kind of true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. She's also a lot more looser. Madani is in this season because of things that have happened to her. She's willing to kind of go against the law, or maybe the letter of the law, to
because once you've done it once.
But somebody who won't, my man Brett Mahoney, he's trying to stay on the straight and narrow. He was a beat cop when Frank Castle first showed up in Hell's Kitchen, and now by the time Punisher season 2 is around, he's gotten some merit.
He's moved on up.
He's got some merit under that badge, and he seems to be constantly shocked by the rules that Madani's willing to bend to get things done. How do you feel about Brett's perspective of all this?
To me, Brett is just like. Brett is still just a street cop, not like a beat cop obviously, but like a cop on the street doing the grind who's looking up at these like these high powered agents of the government, and it's just like, oh, y'all get to just do whatever y'all want.
Yeah,
it's walking into people's crime scenes and just messing all sorts of stuff up and covering things up, and I'm trying to do my job.
I never gotten that perspective before, so I'm actually happy that it was in this show. How NYPD would look at CIA or vice versa.
Yeah.
And we get that between Madani and Mahoney in this. But Brett is so hell-bent on doing things the right way that he eventually arrests the Punisher, which causes almost his death because of such. So I just worry that every season we would have to get a new cop in here who says the Punisher's ways are not right. You know what I'm saying? Like, Madani was kind of that in season 1. She comes around, and then Brett's that in season 2, and he comes around. By the end of that happens when Billy Russo ends up dying. We'll get to that in a second. Everyone's kind of dirty, right? Everyone's lying. Everyone's kind of like, well,
I think everyone is just so in a hurry to get this done with.
Just get this done and get it over with. But let's
can I just lock up muggers again?
Let's get back to Frank, because he is the who we're trying to focus on the most with this conversation. And in this, he does, for whatever reason, get a really, really close relationship with Amy, and it almost mirrors that very, very famous film, Leon the Professional, where you have this supposedly trained cold killer get his heart warmed by a younger female that he hopes to protect, and not only protect, but kind of train in the ways of what this world is, and stuff there. My favorite part of their interaction is probably not a lot of people's, but it's when her crazy ass tries to throw a tennis ball at him and unarm him when he goes to the trailer. And he judo flips her, puts the gun in her face, and is like, "What the hell are you doing? What the hell are you doing?" And she's like, "I'm just trying." He's like, "You're not trying to do nothing." He flips out. He shoots the gun in the trailer.
Yeah.
He's like, "You see how close it could have been?" And Curtis is like, "Come on, man." And again, I was there like, no, like, none of this is a joke. You don't surprise Frank Castle with a birthday party. You understand? If everyone dies in that party, it's your fault.
Right.
Because you just try to surprise and jump out of a corner of Frank Castle.
She only doubles down further on this mistake by almost shooting Curtis with a shotgun.
You understand what I'm saying? And all kinds of people getting shot. Like, they walk up on Madani, and Madani shoots Mahoney because of that. Like, stop trying to jump scare these people who are trained with guns.
Itchy trigger fingers around here.
You understand? A lot of these people dealing with trauma. You trying to jump scare these people to get their attention? Like, nah, none of that.
There is a lot of like Amy Bendix is way in over her head and keeps trying to do things.
She impersonated a nurse. She
got away with that as amazing.
She punched and slapped the Punisher.
Mm-hmm.
She stole his van. She escaped from him twice, I want to say.
Yeah. And then she pulls off that con where she goes from waitress to schoolgirl.
Right. So my biggest thing is that I think the reason why I rubbed up against their relationship so poorly is that I never saw him have this amount of patience with anyone.
Right.
Anyone. Karen, anybody. Like, the things that she was able to get away with with Frank Castle boggled my mind. Like, you stole his van. That's a shotgun to the chest.
Right.
You try to scare him, when he had a loaded gun. That's a shotgun to the chest. You slapped him and you punched him because you thought he locked you in your room. Like, all that stuff is like, I don't gotta do none of this. I could just go back, check on Beth, which he probably should have. He probably should have just went back and checked on Beth. Pilgrim would have killed one person instead of all the people. He would have killed Amy. It would have been done. They would have got the pictures back and everything would have been Gucci.
But it's the young girl problem.
Oh my
Can't just
gosh.
let that young girl go out.
She didn't warn me like Laura did in Logan. I didn't get that feeling where I'm like, I want her to kick some ass. You understand?
Right.
Like, you know what? She's a little badass. I didn't get that little badass thing. I got like entitlement.
There was a part of me that was afraid. I was like this show was gonna end with she's gonna stick around and like she's gonna be like the
Punisher?
sidekick or like gonna train her. I was just like, good God, no.
It's like a white heart on her vest. Oh, terrible. Terrible. But
Frank is getting pulled in so many directions in this season that it is difficult to focus on like what Frank is journey is, because the beginning of it goes away so quickly.
They're also constantly hindering his journey, whatever his journey is.
Yes.
They want him, many people want him to do what they want him to do.
Yeah.
Amy wants him to find this Pokemon guy and kill him. Madani wants him to find Russo and do that. Curtis wants him to not do anything.
First, Madani just wants him to go back into his hole.
Oh, yeah.
And then when the Billy Russo becomes a problem, I was like, oh, so we need you to kill Billy.
Yeah,
I'm bringing you to New York so you can kill Billy Russo.
So, and then Curtis wants him to just straight up be out of it.
Right.
Like, don't deal with any of this stuff. We're out of this game. Just be out of it. And he can't please anyone.
Curtis wants to not fear for his life anymore.
He was about done with Frank at several points in this series.
Yes.
At one point, he actively just walks out.
Right.
He actively, like, Frank is going to do the bullshit Frank wants to do. Why can't I do what I want to do? And he just leaves.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you feel about Curtis's, I wouldn't call it a turn. I feel like it's kind of a natural progression from where he was left off in season 1.
Curtis just, he got frustrated and he made the decision he made to just like, I don't need to be involved in this mess. I'm still trying to put my life back together from the first time.
Yeah.
And, like, I've got a girl that I keep pushing away to do this.
How'd you feel about him being so affected by killing somebody?
I thought that was interesting. I was like, I guess it's interesting to see that he sees a difference from killing someone being a soldier than to, like, doing it in this civilian life.
Yeah.
And, like, how much that is completely in contrast to Frank, who doesn't see a difference.
Right.
At all.
Yeah, and the fact that they're so cool. Right?
Yes.
Like, they're so cool, and at so many points, Curtis is there to help Frank, but when put in those same shoes,
it was interesting.
Different.
It was interesting to see them laugh about, like, the things they had done to each other previously and the trouble they had gotten each other into.
Right.
Mostly Frank getting Curtis into.
Right. But I think it's then when Curtis is like, I am not in for any of this, because when they eventually get there's a torture scene, right, where Curtis and Madani are like, nah, we're not about this, even though we were about this when it started.
This has gone too far.
Yeah, this has gone too far. Curtis also seems like the anti-Frank because he has a lot more in his life going on.
Yes.
He feels like he has people depending on him. Not only the veterans, but like you said, he had a female, that he was trying to court.
Yes.
And he has a life that he has to maintain. Where Frank kind of has abandoned the idea of having a regular life, at least when he's in tunnel vision Frank Castle Punisher mode.
Yeah.
and stuff. So I guess it makes sense, but I'm not gonna lie to you. I was pissed when Frank came back and he wasn't in that trailer with David. I would, because this also happened when just happened after Amy did what she did,
right?
And I'm just like, why are you all screwing Frank, man? Why y'all all screwing Frank? It was like when Curtis was there with John Pilgrim.
Right.
And John Pilgrim, Curtis is like, I don't know about no girl. And then poof, hey, Frank's loose. And we got him loose and everything. I'm like, Amy, you know the rules. You're supposed to knock and say your name. You're supposed to announce who you are before you get in. There's a whole thing, girl. You just keep acting unilaterally and getting people shot. You need to relax.
It's like, Curtis, where's the girl? I don't know. I left her there.
Yeah, there is no girl. There's no such girl. Hey, Curtis, it's me, the girl. And and the girl that you were keeping secret. And Frank Castle's out of the hospital. So
yeah,
we got to talk about Frank getting jumped, which I thought was crazy. When Billy sets up that trap for Frank and playing loud music and the lights.
Oh man, that one was tough to watch.
It definitely was, man. He was getting shot with like rock salt and stabbed.
Yeah.
And
sliced up,
hit with crowbars. Oh my god,
and just like that flashing light
and the blaring like metal music. How you feel about Billy's whole organization? You know, even though he doesn't remember Anvil.
You mean the Serpent Society?
Yeah, even though I thought it was more like the Purge.
No, like you didn't hear him?
He called it the Serpent Society.
He openly references them being like serpents.
Ah, that makes sense.
And I was just like, it's the Serpent Society.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
How you feel about him just getting back into the swing of like big speeches, big guns, and camaraderie?
I guess that was the old Billy Russo charisma just working its magic again.
Yeah. It shows how much of that is in him and still.
Totally got me, by the way, that to do with the cash checking place was the inside job.
Oh yeah. I was really hyped for that lady standing her ground, but I didn't want her to get killed.
I was too. She was there. She was like, it doesn't work that way, dummy.
Yeah. It can't fit through there. That grenade can't fit through there. All that stuff.
Only to find out that the dude freaking out was an inside man and he had played his part.
Yeah, when he hit the button, I was like, bro, you guys had it. And then when
he was so close.
When he turns out, and initially he's kind of, after that first bust, he's kind of like still like scrambled. Remember, like he takes all the money for himself.
Yeah.
And then he goes back to Krista and they have like an argument and stuff like that. But after a while, he really like digs it, and they have like a clubhouse and they bring girls over.
He comes back with the money. He's just like, y'all can leave with that, or we can make the big score.
Yeah, we can have an army. No one tells us what to do. All this other kind of stuff.
And this is just him falling back into old habits. It's not Anvil, but it's a private militia, basically.
Yeah.
And they're just partying and acting out, and then stealing, doing jobs.
Doing jobs and stealing and stuff. I did like that other scene of Frank showing up at the highway. Russo!
Right.
He takes off the mask, and then Russo just flips out because he remembers his skull, and he truly bugs out.
Which is just it has not been cleaned since.
Yes, and that's a lot of that blood is his.
So it looks like exactly the same.
A lot of that blood is
and
his.
He just deer in the headlight freaks out.
But Russo's memory is a lot of what this season is about, and that brings me to the question: what makes vengeance or revenge enjoyable? Is it the fact that the person you've gotten revenge on knows and remembers and can call back to you being the person that did it? Is it a sense of justice? And does justice also come with remembrance? Like, you stole my car, so I crashed yours. Does the revenge come full circle when you know that you're where you're at as a result of what you've done, or just the fact that things are even now?
I think there has to be an evenness, but I think the evenness does have to come with that mark.
Yeah.
So like, if you cut me with a knife and I remember it, and it leaves a mark on me that constantly reminds me of that moment. The idea of vengeance is that I leave an equal or bigger mark on you that reminds you of your failure in some way.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole point.
So
if I have to suffer with this thing that reminds me of this mistake or this failure I had, I want you to have an equal or greater failing or scar.
Yeah.
And the fact that Billy doesn't remember the scar means it was for nothing.
That's what I was gonna say.
He should have just killed him.
It's not only the idea that you scarred me and I need to scar you. or sorry, there's not only the idea that you scarred me and you need to be scarred, but I need to scar you, right?
Yes.
Because if somebody, if I
Absolutely.
had cut you with a knife, and then they leave the scar for 5 years, we don't see each other for 5 years, and when you meet me again, you realize that somebody else has cut me. That revenge is still not. That revenge is still not fully realized because
No.
you have to be the one to feel just and feel like everything is even.
Right.
Frank has to remember every day that his family was killed by Russo and men like him, or just the organization in general.
Mm-hmm.
Madani has no choice but to remember every day what Russo did to her, how he used her, how he shot her, and how he damn near killed her.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that at one point, like, you have to live with that. I'm good. Like, I live,
Right.
So it's almost like he got away free.
Mm-hmm.
And we would think that he got away free if we didn't see how much of the little bit that he remembered haunted him.
Right.
And so vengeance becomes enjoyable then when the person seeking it feels like things are just and people are on even playing fields. And so at the end of the carousel, Frank is justified. He got his vengeance, and it is what it is. But past that, when he realizes that Billy doesn't remember, he has to kind of do it again. Like he has to kind of remember him again.
He has to finish the job he should have.
And Billy's memory and Frank's whole existence also deals with this idea of like trauma as justification. Not only trauma as like things that happen and how we cope with it, but also this idea that we are allowed a certain level of rule breakage because of our trauma. How do you feel about that logic?
I'm not a fan of it.
Not a fan of it?
Not a fan of it.
I agree.
I
feel like it's an excuse.
That like what good are lines and rules if we can stretch and bend the lines and rules for specific situations?
Yeah, but that's how Brett feels, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but Madani's like, well, if you had experienced what I experienced, the trauma.
No, I sympathize with Brett completely.
Yeah. But I also sympathize with Madani.
No,
because
absolutely.
Russo's a maniac, and I almost died because of that man, and now he's just walking around, chilling stuff. Like, I get that every cop is on it, but y'all need to be like more on it, and maybe more on it is some guy who just has a bunch of guns in his van and goes around and killing people and stuff. But I do think they try to use. I think especially Dumont tries to allow Billy to believe that all the bad that he does is justified because bad was done to him. And so if he needs to be reborn from the trauma and wash away the mistakes or the bad things that were done to him, make sure that he's on top next time. When he rebuilds the sandcastle, make sure that he's on top as opposed to being the one, constantly being pushed aside because of his background, his financial status, or just how he was raised.
Which is all fine when she's just trying to heal him until she goes full-blown villain and starts plotting to hurt other people.
No, I agree. Yeah. And can revenge ever fill the void? I think we're kind of shown that it can't, right? Like,
no,
there's never gonna be a full, like, Madani thinks that she got her revenge on Russo and kind of doesn't, and she does seem satisfied to tell Crystal that he's dead or that he's dying. So maybe she did get to fill that void. Maybe if, knock on wood, we see Madani again, she'll be different, better.
I don't think she ever gets to fill that void, but I think a little bit of her that was looking for that violent retribution is at least like, I could walk away from this now.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that, by the time you hit season 2, Punisher is no longer acting on vengeance, right? Would you say? He's acting in defense and maybe acting proactively in defense, but he's acting in defense. How do you feel about?
There is intended to be a level of altruism in protecting this young girl.
Yeah, but that altruism comes from directly being shot at first, right? Or no,
he goes after those people.
Yeah, it was the bathroom fight first. Actually, he hears some scuffling in the bathroom, goes in there, puts somebody's head through a sink. Right. Yeah, that's Frank. Yeah, that sounds like Frank. And I like that he called Madani, and Madani's like, screw you. What do you think this was? Like, you just call me whenever you get into some stuff, and we handle that. I actually liked her reaction to that there. How do you feel about the Frank Castle versus the Russians in the gym?
Oh, God, that was disgusting.
No guns. Took all the guns off the table. No grenades, no military weaponry whatsoever. Just weights and blood.
Leading up to it was clever.
Yeah.
Just draw them all out, put all the weapons over there. I just get to fight these guys.
Yep. And Turk being bait.
As someone who is lifted and moved around a bunch of barbells and plates in my life, watching a man get just bludgeoned with a 10-pound plate was kind of gruesome.
and like they don't shy away from it, and you actually see like what the results would look like. I thought the practical effects were amazing when they're doing stuff like that, and that's what I'm saying. This show is violent, but I think its gratuitous violence is cautionary tale that this stuff is not fun.
Right.
That this is not just pow pow whatever. All the blood spatter, all the screams of horror, all the
there were some very disgusting results at the end.
Yeah, you need to see that this is what happens at that. You don't just shoot into the void, that person fall over, and that's all it is.
Yeah.
People get hurt. People are affected. Your own self is affected. You're traumatized and stuff. The full trauma that comes with guns and gun violence. But when the first season came out, it came out close to the Las Vegas shooting. Mm-hmm. And so they were very testy about, how they advertised it, everything. And
did they move it back a week?
I know that they didn't show anything for Comic-Con that year.
Okay.
They were supposed to have like a whole thing, and they chose not to show.
Something got changed or moved.
Yeah. And so
I remember there was a big fear that they would like go back and completely re-edit the show.
Yeah. I feel like in season 2 they kind of steered away from the military commentary a little less or a little bit more. They steered away from it a little bit more, and they steered away from the gun violence a little bit more. There was violence.
Right.
But most of the time when you see Frank in this show, he has a handgun.
Right.
He's pulling a handgun out of the back of his waistband, and he's,
a lot of knives.
Yeah, a lot of knives and stuff like that. Do you think that was intentional? Do you think that they were?
I don't know if it was intentional. I think it was just it was a way to involve Frank a lot more physically, because gun violence is a distance game.
Yes.
And it's not always the most pleasing unless the gun violence is constantly mowing down people.
Right. How'd you feel about that gun violence in that hotel scene with him and John Pilgrim?
Oosh.
Where he's literally blasting holes out of the wall. Just douche.
Right.
Douche.
That was something else.
It was crazy to see Frank outgunned.
Right.
Like he literally just showed up with a handgun, and homeboy had the entire armory in his hotel room.
I did enjoy the as a storytelling plot. I did enjoy the moment where like they did con him into thinking he mowed down those girls. And he just freaks out.
And his idea that I deserve every bad that comes to me because of this.
Yeah.
The idea that Russo could do it with no conscience.
Right.
And still feel like he deserved a happy ending. And Frank think that he did do it and think that he doesn't.
And was ready to just give it like when the guy comes to take him out for revenge of the Irish mob, but he was just like, go ahead, do it. This is the end for me. Yeah. I deserve this.
I think that was there to show you how different that they were, because Billy says it multiple times that they're not that different, and that's kind of a cliche when it comes to this superhero genre of like we're not so different, you and I. But I think that showed how different Punisher was, and now Billy succumbs to a couple shots that Madani gave him, and calls Curtis because he doesn't want to die alone.
Yeah, and he still sees Curtis as a brother.
I kind of felt like that was going to be a trap. I don't know why. Maybe my Billy senses were kicking off or whatever. But I really
same sense as Madani has, but
yeah, but
I did kind of believe it was genuine. Like, I'm still going on the fact that like he says that like there are people telling him these things, so he knows it up here, but he doesn't feel it in his heart.
Yeah.
So like the things he feels or the only emotions he remembers is that these two were brothers and connected.
Yeah.
Which is probably why Billy doesn't kill him outright the first time they meet up.
Yeah, and they also say that they can't kill him. Punisher says he has a shot on Billy, he doesn't take it, and Curtis says the same. So that brothers in arms thing really does come through from both seasons, even with all the horrifying things that they've done to one another. I think you reach the height of sympathy for Russo when he literally wakes up in a dumpster, where a dirty doctor has ripped him off.
Took his money.
Took one bullet out of him, and left him there to die.
He passed out in pain. It's just like, screw this guy.
It's also said many times that Russo won't die, so I was kind of surprised that Frank just walked up on him and unload. Well, he unloaded. He shot him 3 times.
Like the moment that scene came on, I was like, there Billy Russo is again, alone and unloved.
Yeah.
In a garbage can.
Alone and unloved, and in a garbage
dying in a garbage can.
But also dragging himself out of it.
Yeah.
Again dragging himself up from the bottom. For the 3rd, 4th time in the series.
So like when that scene immediately is followed by like the Krista Dumont saying like he won't die, he's too strong. Like you're kind of led to believe it for that moment until Frank walks up on him.
And that kind of steadfastness is a bit admirable.
Yes.
And so you're like, well, okay, I get you did a lot of horrible things, but I'm glad that you won't die. I guess we'll end our season 2 discussion with how that series ends. So, Frank lets Amy go.
Mm-hmm.
Frank lets Pilgrim go because Pilgrim was ultimately being coerced by the Schultz. Does the David stuff get out?
The Davis?
David? Does he just let the pictures out? Does he just...
It's unclear.
Right, it is, right?
Yeah, they don't ever say what happens to David Schultz and the photos. It seemed like he was ready to turn his parents in, but it doesn't matter anyway because Frank killed the wife and then the husband killed himself.
Yeah.
So
what do you think of that scene?
I sort of enjoyed that, like, the Punisher got to do something.
Yeah. When she first showed up, I'm like, Amy, again, I'm like, what are you doing? Are you in your depth? Are you going to get this accomplished? Did you come here on your own? You know, like, he's trying to put you on a straight and narrow. Like, he's trying to do all this stuff so you won't have to, and now you're here. So when he showed up, I was like, thank God. We got a professional in the house. He's going to get this done. And just the way he shot Eliza.
It was just sort of that moment where, like, she got to do whatever, and then he just like, okay, well, we tried it your way.
Seeing him shoot Eliza, I thought was, like, cool and crazy and just, like, out of nowhere.
Just cold-blooded, just like, bang.
He's like, yeah, she decided for herself, so you get to choose.
She did reach.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought that was pretty cool, but we ultimately see him descend on 2 gangs. He's called a gang truce for 2 gangs to show up. Neither gang knows who actually called the truce. Frank Castle shows up in his full leather coat, the bulletproof
Punisher vest,
and his iconic pose of holding 2 guns, dual wielding, and just airing out,
away.
Just airing out 2 machine guns or Uzi's worth of clips onto this gang. While giving us one of our now
primal
patented
guttural screams.
Yeah, Bernthal scream, the Bernthal grunt.
It's gungasm.
How'd you feel about that moment? And I guess when it all said and done, how'd you feel about season 2?
I thought season 2 was okay. I did like that moment for what it was, despite the fact that it was immediately followed by an in memoriam for Stan Lee, and that was poorly placed.
Yeah, that was so, like, obviously uncomfortable. I don't understand how that got passed, but I mean, I'm all for remembering Stan and
sure,
Stan,
just like several
weird.
Young people gunned down in memory. Please remember Stan. Like, no, wait, this doesn't. No,
yeah,
you could have waited after the credits to do this.
Definitely,
fine.
No, I dig it.
I thought that was a cool look. Like, you got him in that almost full regalia for Punisher that fans are familiar with, doing his particular pose. Bernthal pulls off the look very well because a lot of people would probably look hokey doing it.
Yeah,
but he rocks that whole thing. This season was okay. I thought there were a lot of just enjoyable little character moments, but as a full show, like, it's pulled you in so many directions, and like you're constantly being like swung back and forth to like this storyline and that storyline and this storyline. It's I'll make a silly little reference because it just came out and it's topical. It's like if Resident Evil 2 had both storylines with one character.
Right, it's a lot. It's a whole lot.
It's like, okay, now Leon's gonna do Claire's part, and now Leon's gonna go back over here.
I also feel like they maybe they got the word that a lot of people felt like season 1 was kind of depressing,
right,
and kind of sad. Frank is a lot less retrospective in this season. He's a lot less thinking back on his ideas and his involvement in the military and all that kind of stuff. He does have flashbacks. He does have moments where he remembers, but he is way more jovial. He's way more jokey.
Laughs.
He occasionally laughs. He's way more charismatic, and I felt like maybe that's where my disconnect came from, because although season 1 was bleak, I believed that the existence of that character would be bleak.
I like when he laughs with Curtis.
Yeah.
Because that's like the only real relationship he has, and I like to see that there's that he can coexist with humans.
Yeah.
In some way.
Right.
Other than angry Punisher face. I think that's good.
Yeah.
With other people, it's weird.
Yeah. I think it was cool to finally see that whole trench coat and dual wielding stuff. We got the Punisher van. So many cool things. If you're a Punisher fan, you definitely got stuff to hang your hat on. And maybe it wasn't 100% perfect, but it definitely had moments of pure, like, this is what I wanted. Mm-hmm. This is what the Punisher should be. and I really dug it. I did. I really dug it. The next Punisher is gonna have some big shoes to fill because
if there is one.
Yes, because they fleshed a big trench coat jacket to fill because they really did flesh this character out in a way that I feel like has never really been done on the silver screen.
Right.
Definitely been done in comics because they have the medium. That's the medium for that. So many issues, you have the time to tell that. But I'm glad they took this episodic nature to this character, so you can see what a day in the life, a week in the life, a couple months in the life.
It's a character that definitely needs time.
Yeah, and it definitely is a process. Like you definitely watching the show definitely puts you through a gamut of emotions, and it makes you question why you're feeling some certain emotions certain times, and if you should be feeling them at certain times, and it goes to just the illogical nature of humanity and how emotions drive our decision making skills. But I think that this was a definitive version of the Punisher. This is going to be many people's version of the Punisher, and this is mine for the time being. Until I
still think
better.
season 1 is rewatchable if you want to be like, season 1 is still very enjoyable, despite that I just thought season 2 was middle of the road.
Yeah.
Other than you outright not liking it, which I understand.
I definitely agree. And with us completing this review of and this character analysis of Marvel's The Punisher, we actually finish up every single Marvel Netflix show. We can do deep dives on other character analysis, but we've covered at least one season of every Marvel Netflix show up until this point. So if you want your Jessica Jones fix, Jessica Jones season 2 review is up. Iron Fist season 3
will be coming. That's the last confirmed
That's the last
one
we do here, and hopefully you guys are here for that. And the only way you can be is to follow the Major Issues podcast. If you're listening to this, thank you so much for listening, because it's listeners like you that grow our audience. But you got to stay in tune with the Major Issues podcast. So make sure that you are subscribed. And you can do that by going to wherever podcasts are found, like Podbean, Podcast Addict, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. We're on YouTube. We're wherever podcasts are found. If you have an iPhone, you have a pre-installed podcast app already on there. So just search Major Issues Podcast. If you're on Google, search Major Issues Podcast. We're the first ones to pop right up. But that's how you can listen to us. If you want us to listen to you, if you guys got some questions, comments, and concerns, all you guys need to do is go to facebook.com/comicbookclick, Instagram @comicbookclick, or use the hashtag comicbookclick to talk about the newest, hottest, latest, and greatest things to come to comic books and comic book media. Or hit us up on Twitter @Major Issues CBC. I know you have one. GT?
Yes. Rebirth GT is my Twitter handle. I'm on there now. I'll probably be talking about the fact that I've started to read the Superman Birthright. It's actually my first time I've read one of the origin stories.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So that's what I've been reading on the way here, and I'll be reading on the way out.
Yeah, we actually just posted on across all social medias, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, Boss Logic's idea of what Billy Russo would have looked like after that. Because one thing we didn't talk about on this cast was that his scars were kind of a little bit to be,
You were asking for a lot if you wanted a comic book accurate depiction of the Jigsaw face.
Yeah, but then they probably shouldn't have went so hard in the carousel.
Probably not.
Right? Like, he should have just took a knife to him at those points in his face.
That's fair.
And then it was what it is. But they literally grinded his face against the thing. Or maybe it's just the things of the brilliance of modern medicine. that could be it too. But
Scars heal now.
Yeah, but Jigsaw is grotesque, and especially in that Punisher War Zone, he is definitely not a sight for sore eyes. So people wanted that from Billy, didn't get it. I just chalk it up to the brilliance of modern medicine and good healthcare. But find us wherever we're on social media, because we're constantly talking about this comics stuff, and it's gonna be good. Next episode is around is getting closer and closer to Valentine's Day. So we're going to be tackling Scott Pilgrim versus the World next week, which is going to be our little forte, and a little bit of love, a little bit of comics, and some more.
Probably my favorite movie of that year.
And the only thing that I ever care about when it comes to comics, Chris Evans. So we will have all of that here next week. So make sure that you guys are here for that. If you guys can do us a favor, rate and review us on iTunes, because it's the quickest way for us to grow our audience and grow as podcasters and know what we're doing right. And we still got a Captain Marvel giveaway going on. Take a picture with one of our shirts from TeePublic. Use the hashtag CBCWorthy for a chance to win 2 free tickets to see Captain Marvel in theaters. That contest ends in March, but all of those details are in the show notes. My name is George Serrano, a.k.a. The Don.
My name is Gregory Thomas, a.k.a. GT Rebirth.
And this has been our Punisher deep dive character analysis, dealing with all things in Daredevil and Punisher seasons 1 and 2. And remember, whether or not you can remember all the deep trauma that's going on in your life, whether or not you're a one-man war on crime or just some little girl who can't stop getting in the way. Whether you have forgiven yourself for all your sins, whether you are the crap has hit your shoes, or whether or not you feel like you found that jigsaw piece in your life, remember that we are all the Clique. You're one of us, man. You're just like we're in the foxhole, you're in the foxhole. We are the Clique. And you, yes, you are worthy.